I've always been good with languages. It's the one skill that came naturally to me when everything else felt like a struggle. By 25, I was fluent in 4 languages besides English and working on a 5th. People assumed I'd become a teacher or join the diplomatic service, but translation work paid better and let me work from home in my small flat in Oxford. Most of my jobs came through a freelancer website where clients post projects and translators bid for the work. It's competitive, but I'd built a solid reputation for accuracy and discretion, particularly with technical or specialized content. The majority of my work involved translating business documents, academic papers, or technical manuals. Nothing exciting, but it paid the bills. 3 months ago, I received a private message through the platform from someone who didn't have a public profile. They claimed to represent a research group studying dark web communication systems and needed a translator for content in languages I specialized in: Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, and Spanish. The message explained that the content might be disturbing as it related to criminal networks operating on the dark web, but assured me the research was for academic purposes and would help law enforcement agencies monitor these hidden corners of the internet. The pay they offered was substantial, nearly triple my usual rate, enough to clear my student debts within months rather than years. They explained the higher compensation was due to the disturbing nature of the material and the strict confidentiality requirements. I'd need to sign an extensive non-disclosure agreement and work through their secure platform rather than my usual channels. I should have been more skeptical, but the opportunity felt legitimate. The email addresses used academic domains, the contracts appeared professional, and the initial test translation they sent, an analysis of communication methods used by drug cartels, seemed consistent with criminology research. Besides, I'd translated medical documents and legal depositions before that contained disturbing content. I was confident in my ability to remain detached and professional. After completing the test piece to their satisfaction, I received access to their secure platform. It required multiple layers of authentication and used encryption that seemed unnecessarily robust for academic research, but I rationalized that this level of security made sense for sensitive work involving dark web criminal networks. They even provided me with special software to access .onion sites, dark web addresses not accessible through standard browsers. The first few weeks involved translating text conversations, dark web forum posts, and what appeared to be marketplace listings from various languages into English. The content was disturbing. Discussions of drug trafficking, weapons sales, and human smuggling on hidden sites accessible only through Tor networks. But nothing beyond what I'd expected given the project description. I maintained professional distance, focusing on accuracy rather than content. About a month into the project, the nature of the assignments began to shift. I started receiving links to video files hosted on their secure server. The brief explained that these were recordings of conversations between members of criminal organizations, and they needed both verbal and behavioral translations, noting cultural contexts and non-verbal communication that might not be obvious to researchers unfamiliar with the languages and cultures involved. The first few videos matched this description. Grainy footage of people discussing what appeared to be illegal business transactions in various languages. I transcribed and translated their conversations, noted cultural nuances, and provided context where needed. Then the videos began to change. The quality improved. The settings became more controlled. Stark rooms with concrete walls, minimal furniture, professional lighting. The conversations became one-sided, with one person speaking directly to the camera, while others remained silent in the background. The speakers began addressing viewers directly, promising special experiences and authentic content. I told myself this was just deeper research into how these networks marketed themselves, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the material. When I asked my contact about the changing nature of the content, they explained that the research had progressed to studying how these networks advertised to potential customers. The explanation seemed reasonable enough for me to continue. One night, I received an urgent translation request with a substantial bonus for immediate completion. The file was a live stream recording in Russian, hosted on a dark website with a complex .onion address. When I opened it, I was confronted with something I had never expected to see. The video showed a room similar to those I'd been seeing recently, but this time there was a person restrained in a chair. A masked individual stood nearby, occasionally adjusting camera equipment. The Russian speaker was describing what was about to happen and explaining how viewers could influence the proceedings through cryptocurrency payments. The entire setup was clearly a dark web red room, a live-streamed torture session where anonymous viewers could pay to request specific actions from anywhere in the world while hiding behind layers of encryption. I immediately closed the file and messaged my contact, explaining that I couldn't participate in translating this type of content and that they should report it to authorities. Their response was alarmingly casual. They thanked me for my concern, but explained that this was a sophisticated simulation created to study how these networks operated. They assured me no one was actually harmed in the creation of these educational materials. I wasn't convinced, but I also had no proof that what I'd seen wasn't staged. I decided to withdraw from the project anyway, citing ethical concerns. They accepted my decision and processed my final payment, which appeared in my bank account the next day, significantly more than what I was owed, with a note classifying the excess as a discretionary bonus for exceptional service. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I received an email from a different address containing a video file. When I opened it, I saw a compilation of clips showing me in my flat, working at my desk, sleeping, showering, talking on the phone. All filmed from angles that suggested cameras had been installed throughout my home. The email contained no message, just the video. I searched my flat frantically, finding tiny cameras concealed in smoke detectors, light fixtures, and air vents. I removed them all, changed my locks, and spent the night at a friend's house. When I returned the next day, I found an envelope had been slipped under my door containing a USB drive. The drive held a single file, a video of what appeared to be an actual dark web red room broadcast, not a simulation. The setting was similar to the videos I'd been translating, but this was clearly real. The victim's fear was palpable, the violence undeniable. At the end of the video, text appeared in all 5 languages I spoke, stating that I was now complicit in their operation and that my translations had helped them expand their dark web audience to new markets across multiple language barriers. I went to the police immediately. I showed them the cameras I'd found, explained the work I'd been doing, and described the threatening video. They took the report seriously and sent an officer to check my flat for additional surveillance equipment. They found nothing beyond what I'd already discovered, but advised me to stay elsewhere while they investigated. Their investigation revealed that the academic domains used in the emails were spoofed. The payment had come through a series of dark web cryptocurrency exchanges designed to be untraceable. The secure platform I'd been working on had disappeared completely, leaving no digital footprint. They told me this had the hallmarks of a sophisticated dark web criminal operation and suggested I remain vigilant but try to resume normal life. I spent the next few weeks staying with friends, checking for surveillance, and jumping at every unexpected noise. Eventually, with no further contact from the people who had hired me, I began to relax slightly. Perhaps they had moved on, finding another translator who wouldn't question their requests. Then the messages started appearing on my phone. Text messages in different languages, all containing variations of the same theme. They knew where I was, they were watching me, and I had unfinished work to complete. The messages came from different numbers, sometimes in languages I didn't even work with. I changed my number twice, but the messages always found me. About a month after I went to the police, I received a package at my new temporary address, a place only my closest friends knew about. Inside was a high-quality digital camera and a list of instructions in multiple languages. I was to set up the camera at specific angles, test lighting conditions, and prepare for a live translation assignment at a designated time. The instructions emphasized that failure to comply would result in the release of videos showing me viewing and translating material related to criminal activities. I took the package to the police, who added it to their investigation, but warned me that these networks were notoriously difficult to track. They suggested I consider temporarily relocating to a different city while they continued to investigate. I moved to Glasgow, where a university friend had a spare room in her flat. I told no one except my immediate family where I was going. I found work translating mundane corporate documents under a different name. I started to rebuild some semblance of normal life. 3 weeks ago, I noticed someone following me home from the small office where I'd found work, a nondescript man in a dark coat who maintained the same distance behind me for several streets. When I changed direction suddenly, he adjusted his course to match. I lost him by ducking into a department store and leaving through a different exit, but the encounter left me shaken. The following day, I received an email containing a street view photograph of the building where I was staying in Glasgow. The subject line was simply, "Found you," written in all 5 languages I spoke. 2 days later, a courier delivered a package to my workplace. Inside was another digital camera, identical to the one I turned over to the police, and a note explaining that my debut broadcast had been scheduled for the following week. This time, the note included details about my friend's daily routine, my parents' home address, and my sister's workplace. The threat was clear: comply or those close to me would suffer. I'm now in a small bed and breakfast in the Scottish Highlands, using a public computer to write this. I've left my phone, laptop, and all other trackable devices behind. I paid cash for the train ticket and registered under a false name. But I know this is only a temporary solution. The most terrifying realization is that these people don't just want a translator. They want a performer. Someone who can communicate with victims and viewers in multiple languages simultaneously. Someone who can expand their audience beyond English-speaking viewers. Someone who can bring a unique skill to their broadcasts. When I translate materials, I don't just convert words from one language to another. I convey nuance, emotion, cultural context. I make communication feel natural and authentic across language barriers. It's a skill that took years to develop, and now it's being sought after for the most horrific purpose imaginable. The scheduled date for what they're calling my debut broadcast is 3 days from now. I've stopped running because I've realized there's nowhere I can go that they won't eventually find me. These people have resources, connections, and apparently unlimited access to surveillance. They tracked me across 3 cities through name changes and new devices. I've contacted the police again, sharing everything I know about the scheduled broadcast. They've promised to increase patrols near my family's homes and to continue investigating, but they've been frank about the limitations they face with these types of networks. jurisdiction issues, encryption, anonymizing technology, all create barriers to effective law enforcement action. I keep thinking about how I unwittingly help these people expand their dark web audience. How many translations did I provide that helped them reach new viewers in the hidden corners of the internet? How many people paid in Bitcoin to access content because they could now understand what was being offered? I became part of their dark web operation without realizing it, and now they want to bring me fully into their world. Tonight, the owner of the bed and breakfast knocked on my door to let me know a package had arrived for me. A package addressed to the false name I'm using at a location I selected at random just yesterday. I haven't opened it. It's sitting on the dresser as I write this. I know what it contains. Another camera, another set of instructions, another reminder that they can find me anywhere. The broadcast is scheduled for Saturday night. I'm running out of options and places to hide. I keep hoping the police investigation will yield results before then, but I'm not optimistic. These networks have stayed ahead of law enforcement for years. They wouldn't have survived this long if they were easy to catch. The most disturbing thought is that if they force me to participate, thousands of people in multiple countries will be watching on the dark web. People who have paid in untraceable cryptocurrency for access. People hiding behind anonymous Tor browsers. People who consider this dark web entertainment. And I'll be expected to translate the horror into their native languages, making sure nothing is lost in translation. I never thought my gift for languages would make me valuable to people like this. I never imagined my skills would be sought after for something so horrific on the dark web. But in a perverse way, it makes sense. Expanding markets in the darkest corners of the internet requires breaking down language barriers, even for the most terrible content hidden behind layers of encryption and anonymity. I don't know what I'll do when Saturday comes. I don't know if there's anywhere left to run. I only know that my words have power, and for the first time in my life, that terrifies me. The package on the dresser just moved slightly. I think my time is up. I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone, but I need to get it off my chest before I lose my mind. You know how some experiences are so disturbing that you start to doubt whether they actually happened? That's where I've been for the past 3 months since that night at the Penumbra Gallery. I keep telling myself it couldn't have been real, that I imagined it all. But then I'll catch a news item about another missing person or see an advertisement for an exclusive art show, and it all comes flooding back. I tried going to the police, but the investigation went nowhere. It's like the whole thing has been wiped clean, and I can't shake the feeling that people with serious money and influence want to keep it that way. I've spent the last decade as an arts journalist for various online publications, specializing in the more experimental corners of the contemporary art world. My particular focus has been the intersection of technology and art, AI-generated exhibitions, VR installations, blockchain-authenticated pieces, that sort of thing. This naturally led me to develop an understanding of the darker aspects of digital culture, including the infamous corners of the dark web, where contraband and controversial content circulates beyond mainstream scrutiny. The invitation to the Penumbra Gallery opening arrived via an encrypted email from a source I'd previously interviewed for a piece on controversial digital art markets. The exhibition was titled Visceral Truth and promised to transcend the boundaries between observer and subject through revolutionary live performance techniques. The gallery was a pop-up in an abandoned warehouse in East London, operating for just 3 nights. My source mentioned that several wealthy collectors and dark web art dealers would be present, making it a valuable networking opportunity. The exclusivity appealed to me. Invitation only, no photography permitted, no public social media coverage. I'd attended similar underground exhibitions before and written anonymous reviews that earned me credibility in certain circles. This didn't seem particularly different from other avant-garde showings where the location is revealed only hours before the event. The night of the exhibition was unseasonably cold for September. I arrived at the warehouse at precisely 9 p.m., as instructed. The building looked derelict from the outside. Broken windows patched with black plastic, graffiti covering the lower walls, no visible signage indicating an art event was occurring inside. Only the presence of a well-dressed doorman checking names against a tablet suggested anything legitimate was happening there. After verifying my identity and confiscating my mobile phone, standard practice for exclusive events seeking to prevent leaks, I was ushered through a series of black curtains into the main exhibition space. The transformation from decrepit exterior to polished gallery was impressive. The cavernous interior had been divided into various chambers using temporary walls, each space spotlessly white with professional lighting. Approximately 40 people milled about, drinking champagne from crystal flutes and speaking in hushed tones, a mixture of recognizable art world figures and individuals I suspected were the wealthy collectors my source had mentioned. The first few exhibition rooms featured relatively conventional shock art, photographs of extreme body modifications, video installations showing ritual scarification, sculptures made from what appeared to be preserved animal remains. Provocative, certainly, but nothing particularly groundbreaking for someone familiar with this corner of the art world. I remember thinking the exhibition was surprisingly tame, given the secretive nature of the invitation. It wasn't until I reached the central chamber that things began to feel genuinely unsettling. This room was larger than the others, with a raised circular platform in the center, surrounded by gallery-style seating. A sign indicated this would be the location of the evening's live performance, scheduled to begin at 11 p.m. What caught my attention, however, was the unusual technical setup. Multiple cameras on tripods positioned around the platform, connected to a sophisticated-looking control station where a man in black adjusted settings on several monitors. I overheard fragments of conversation that initially seemed like typical art world pretension, but took on more disturbing connotations in retrospect. Phrases like authentic reaction capture and unfiltered visceral response were exchanged alongside what sounded like technical terminology about stream quality and connection security. One particularly animated conversation near me included mention of premium access packages and cryptocurrency-only transactions. At 10:30 p.m., attendees were encouraged to view the final exhibition room before the performance began. This space contained what appeared to be documentation of previous performances. Photographs showing individuals in various states of distress, their bodies adorned with what I assumed were elaborate makeup effects simulating wounds, burns, and other injuries. The accompanying placards described these as consensual transformative experiences and the ultimate surrender of bodily autonomy in service of artistic truth. The technical proficiency was impressive. I remember commenting to another attendee about the realistic nature of the effects. He smiled in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable, remarking that the Penumbra Collective was known for its commitment to authenticity. As 11 p.m. approached, we were guided back to the central chamber. The lights had been dimmed except for those illuminating the platform, creating a theatrical atmosphere. A woman in a sleek black dress circulated with a tablet, collecting email addresses from attendees who wished to receive the full documentation package. I provided mine, assuming this referred to photographs of the performance, or perhaps a digital catalogue. The gallery director, a tall, angular woman with silver hair, stepped onto the platform to introduce the evening's performance. Her explanation was a nauseating mix of artistic jargon and philosophical posturing about confronting the reality of human fragility and democratizing the experience of suffering. She explained that the performance would be live-streamed to private collectors and patrons unable to attend in person, and that interaction between the physical and virtual audiences would form part of the experience. When the performer was led onto the platform, something felt immediately wrong. Unlike the confident, self-possessed individuals usually found in performance art, this man moved hesitantly, his eyes darting around the room with unmistakable fear. He was young, perhaps mid-20s, thin and pale with numerous tattoos. His wrists bore marks suggesting recent restraint, though these could have been makeup effects consistent with the exhibition's aesthetic. Two assistants positioned him in the center of the platform, securing his ankles to hidden anchor points on the floor. The gallery director explained this was for stability during the transformative process. But his increasing agitation suggested whatever was about to happen wasn't entirely consensual. The realization dawned on me with sickening clarity when the control station operator announced that the stream was live and bidding could commence. On the monitors, I could see what appeared to be a chat interface filled with usernames and cryptocurrency amounts. The gallery director began describing potential modifications while gesturing to different areas of the young man's body, each suggestion corresponding with flurries of activity in the chat. This wasn't performance art simulating harm. It was actual torture being live-streamed to paying viewers on the dark web, disguised as an avant-garde exhibition for a carefully selected in-person audience who were either complicit or, like me, had been duped into providing legitimacy to the event. I felt frozen in place as the first procedure began. A small but unmistakably real incision on the man's shoulder, performed with surgical precision by one of the assistants now wearing latex gloves. The victim's muffled scream cut through the appreciative murmurs of the audience. On the monitors, bids increased rapidly as viewers requested specific modifications. I should have left immediately, should have found help, but a paralyzing mixture of disbelief and fear kept me rooted to my seat. Surely this couldn't be real. Perhaps it was an elaborate hoax designed to provoke exactly the horror I was feeling. The attendance of respected art world figures seemed to support this hypothesis. I desperately clung to this explanation, even as the evidence before my eyes became increasingly difficult to rationalize away. The true turning point came when I made eye contact with the victim. There was no performance in his terror, no artistic statement in his suffering. In that moment of connection, I knew with absolute certainty that I was witnessing something genuinely monstrous. I rose to leave, trying to appear casual, claiming to need the toilet when questioned by one of the staff. Instead of directing me to facilities, however, he insisted on escorting me, his hand firmly gripping my elbow in a way that suggested leaving wasn't truly an option. In the hallway outside the main chamber, I encountered the gallery director engaged in conversation with two attendees. They were discussing private commissions and customized experiences in terms that made it clear the night's performance was merely an introduction to services offered through more discreet channels. When they noticed me, the conversation halted abruptly. The director approached, asking pointed questions about my publication and how I'd received my invitation. Her previously performative warmth had vanished, replaced by calculated assessment. When I mentioned my source, her expression shifted subtly, and she exchanged a glance with my escort that made my blood run cold. What followed was presented as a special tour of the artist's preparation area, but felt unmistakably like being taken into custody. I was led through a service door into the warehouse's back rooms, where the carefully constructed gallery aesthetic gave way to the building's industrial reality. In one room, computer equipment far more sophisticated than necessary for a simple art installation processed what appeared to be multiple live streams. In another, 3 frightened-looking individuals, similar in appearance to the performer on the platform, sat huddled under the watch of a security guard. The director explained in the same poised, articulate manner she'd used during the performance introduction that I had been granted access to privileged information and would need to sign extensive non-disclosure agreements. The alternative, implied rather than stated explicitly, involved joining those awaiting performance opportunities. I signed whatever was placed before me, my hand shaking so violently I barely recognized my own signature. The documents included clauses about artistic confidentiality and performance ethics that thinly disguised their true purpose: to silence witnesses to criminal activity. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, I was returned to the main gallery space where the performance continued. The victim was still conscious, but clearly in shock, his body now bearing multiple modifications that would leave permanent scars at best. The audience watched with the detached appreciation of conventional gallery patrons, occasionally consulting their phones, presumably to follow the online auction determining what would happen next. I remained only long enough to avoid suspicion, then claimed illness and requested to leave. My phone was returned, but when I checked it later, I discovered all photos from that day had been deleted and the device had been reset to factory settings. In the following days, I attempted to report what I'd witnessed to the police. Their initial interest waned rapidly after they visited the warehouse, finding it empty with no evidence of the gallery's existence. The names I provided led nowhere. The Penumbra Collective had no official registration. The gallery director was untraceable, and the building's ownership was buried under layers of shell companies. A week later, I received an email containing only a link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it, finding myself on a password-protected site that appeared to be a catalogue of performances available for private commission. The thumbnail images were mercifully blurred, but recognizable enough that I could identify the young man from the exhibition among them. The final message arrived yesterday, a digital invitation to the next Penumbra event, scheduled for next month at an undisclosed location. The invitation included a personal note mentioning how my journalistic perspective had been particularly valuable and suggesting I might wish to participate more directly in future performances. I've deleted my email accounts, changed my phone number, and am staying with a friend while I arrange more permanent relocation. But I know these precautions are likely insufficient. The Penumbra Collective operates at the intersection of the art world and the dark web, with connections and resources beyond what conventional authorities can easily trace. Every gallery opening I see advertised now fills me with dread. Every art performance a potential front for unimaginable cruelty. The boundary between provocative creativity and genuine atrocity has been irrevocably blurred in my mind. And somewhere, I know the next exhibition is already being prepared, with new performers selected and wealthy patrons eagerly awaiting their invitations. even now, 3 years later, I can't scroll through social media without my stomach lurching at the sight of those aspirational lifestyle photos. Perfect people in perfect settings, sharing their supposedly perfect lives. The sound of a notification ping sends me into a cold sweat. Sometimes I catch myself staring at influencers' vacation posts, wondering if they know what might be happening just beyond the carefully composed frame of their photos. It began with an email that felt like winning the lottery, an exclusive invitation to the Sylvan Circle Creators Retreat, a week-long networking event in a remote part of the Scottish Highlands. Only 20 content creators selected, all expenses paid, with promised connections to major brands and potential sponsorship deals worth tens of thousands of pounds. For someone like me, hovering at just under 50,000 followers and desperately trying to turn my travel content into a sustainable career, it seemed like the breakthrough I'd been chasing since dropping out of university 2 years prior. My parents had been skeptical about my career choice from the beginning, their only child abandoning a sensible marketing degree to photograph herself in scenic locations, chasing likes and brand partnerships. This retreat was my chance to prove them wrong, to show that the long hours of content creation and engagement building could translate into something legitimate. I remember my mother's concerned expression as I packed, her warnings about going somewhere so isolated with strangers. I dismissed her fears with the casual arrogance of someone who believed bad things only happened to other people. The journey to the retreat felt like progressively leaving the real world behind. First a train from Glasgow to Inverness, then a private shuttle through increasingly remote landscapes, and finally a narrow dirt track that wound through ancient pine forests to a modern compound of sleek cabins arranged around a central lodge. The contrast between the primal wilderness and the retreat's minimalist luxury created an unsettling dissonance that I initially mistook for exclusivity. Our hosts, representatives from what they called a private content investment collective, welcomed us with champagne and gift bags containing high-end tech accessories and personalized itineraries. We were an eclectic group: fashion influencers, travel content creators like myself, fitness personalities, a couple of gaming streamers, and even a minor celebrity chef. All of us shared the same hungry look behind our practiced smiles, the same desperate need to climb higher in the ruthless hierarchy of digital relevance. The first 2 days unfolded like a dream. Workshops on monetization strategies, professional photo shoots in stunning natural settings, one-on-one sessions with marketing experts who hinted at life-changing opportunities. We were encouraged to post about the retreat, though asked to keep the exact location private for exclusivity reasons. In the evenings, we gathered in the main lodge for elaborate meals and networking drinks, everyone performing their most charming, authentic selves, while carefully assessing the competition. The strange elements were easy to dismiss at first. The lack of reliable mobile signal didn't seem suspicious for such a remote location, and the satellite Wi-Fi that only worked through their monitored network seemed like a reasonable limitation of the setting. The numerous security cameras were explained as protection against overzealous fans who might have tracked prominent attendees. Even the daily medical checks were framed as a luxury service, ensuring our optimal performance during the intensive program. It was during the third night that I noticed the first real warning sign. Unable to sleep, I stepped outside my cabin for some air and saw staff members escorting one of the fitness influencers, a woman named Kaya with over 2 million followers, toward the administrative building at the edge of the compound. She seemed unsteady, almost sedated, supported between two men who moved with efficient purpose rather than concern. When I mentioned seeing this at breakfast, The retreat director explained that Kaya had suffered an allergic reaction and had been taken to receive medical attention. She would be rejoining us later, he assured everyone. But Kaya never reappeared. Instead, her belongings were removed from her cabin while we were out on a guided hike, and by dinner, it was as if she had never existed. No one questioned this openly, though I caught exchanged glances between some of the others. That night, checking social media through the retreat's network, I noticed something odd. Kaya's accounts were actively posting content, apparently showing her enjoying a spontaneous trip to Barcelona. The posts seemed authentic at first glance, but looking closer, I realized they were all created using previously captured footage, subtly edited to appear current. The following morning brought a new development. A mysterious leaderboard appeared in the main lodge, ranking all participants based on an unspecified scoring system. My name hovered near the bottom of the list, while others like Jamie, a charismatic travel YouTuber, and Eliza, a fashion influencer with a distinctive aesthetic, topped the rankings. The staff encouraged us to improve our standings through engaged participation, without ever clarifying what this meant. That same day, our activities took a darker turn. The workshop shifted from marketing strategies to discussions about loyalty and sacrifice for success. We were asked to complete psychological profiles, ranking our personal ethics and boundaries in hypothetical scenarios. During meals, staff circulated with tablets showing our real-time social media analytics alongside our leaderboard positions, creating an atmosphere of intense competition and paranoia. On the fifth night, after another participant, a gaming streamer who had vocally questioned the retreat's increasingly strange activities, disappeared under similar circumstances to Kaya, I decided to investigate. Waiting until after midnight, I slipped out of my cabin and made my way to the administrative building I'd seen earlier. A window left slightly ajar allowed me to hear voices from within, clinical discussions about extraction value and audience engagement metrics that made little sense until I managed to peer inside. What I saw continues to haunt my darkest moments. A sophisticated broadcasting studio where multiple screens displayed live feeds from our cabins, our workshops, even our private bathrooms. But most horrifying was the largest monitor, showing what appeared to be a dark web streaming platform where anonymous viewers were placing bids and commenting on the contestants. With sickening clarity, I realized we weren't retreat participants. We were unwitting performers in some twisted reality elimination game where being voted off had consequences far beyond lost followers. In one corner of the room, a medical area had been established where the missing participants appeared to be held in sedated states, cameras documenting everything. According to the on-screen metrics, the highest viewing numbers and bidding activity occurred during these elimination sequences. I couldn't see exactly what happened after the sedation, but the clinical tools arranged nearby suggested something surgical, something final. I backed away in silent horror, nearly collapsing with the shock of understanding. The entire retreat was a front for a dark web channel that monetized the exploitation and eventual elimination of desperate content creators. People so hungry for fame, they'd walk willingly into isolation, surrendering their privacy and ultimately their safety for the promise of recognition. The next morning brought the announcement of another departure. Jamie, who had been top of the leaderboard just hours earlier. As a staff member explained his sudden allergic reaction with the same practiced concern they'd used before, I noticed something chilling. Tiny adjustments in everyone's scores following the announcement. Highest gains for those who seemed most visibly affected by the news, We were being rewarded for our emotional reactions, our authentic distress generating engagement from unseen viewers. That night, I rose to third on the leaderboard after genuinely breaking down during a vulnerability workshop where we discussed our deepest fears. The retreat director personally congratulated me on my breakthrough performance, the gleam in his eyes revealing the double meaning in his words. I smiled through my terror, suddenly understanding the game well enough to play it, to perform distress without raising suspicion, to appear invested while planning escape. For 2 more days, I maintained this delicate deception, gathering information and searching for weaknesses in their security. I discovered that the elimination selections weren't entirely based on the leaderboard. They targeted those who asked too many questions, who seemed suspicious, or paradoxically, those generating the highest viewer engagement. The perfect victims were the ones whose disappearances would create the most compelling content without risking exposure. My opportunity came during a staged power outage designed to film our reactions to isolation and darkness. In the confusion, I slipped away from the group, using the maintenance access I'd identified earlier to reach the perimeter fence. The journey through miles of highland wilderness that followed, barefoot after losing my shoes in a stream crossing, using stars for navigation, feels like something that happened to someone else. A survival story from a person I no longer recognize. I eventually reached a remote farmhouse where a suspicious but ultimately kind elderly couple allowed me to contact police. By the time authorities reached the retreat location 3 days later, the entire operation had vanished. Buildings emptied, equipment removed, not so much as a footprint remaining. The investigation stalled with jurisdictional complications and lack of evidence beyond my testimony, which sounded increasingly delusional even to my own ears as days passed. The most horrifying epilogue came 6 weeks later, when I discovered that all the missing influencers' accounts remained active, posting computer-generated content that mimicked their styles with uncanny accuracy. Their digital ghosts continued accumulating followers, hawking products, maintaining the illusion of aspirational lives that had already ended. No one in their audiences seemed to notice the subtle differences, the absence of true humanity behind the carefully filtered images. I deleted all my social media that day. Sometimes I check on those accounts, watching artificial intelligence perpetuate the personas of people who wanted fame badly enough to die for it, wondering if their audiences will ever realize they're following phantoms. More disturbing still is the knowledge that somewhere, the Sylvan Circle has simply relocated, rebranded, and recruited a new cast of ambitious creators desperate enough to ignore every warning sign. Each time I see another viral challenge, another dangerous trend pursued for views, another isolated retreat promoted by smiling influencers, I want to scream warnings into the void. But who would listen? In a world where attention is currency and authenticity is performance, what could be more authentic than real fear, real elimination, real consequences? The ultimate content for a viewership numbed by endless performative reality. People always ask how someone like me ended up in this situation. I suppose it's fair to wonder how a university cleaner from Brighton could stumble onto something so dark that thousands of people are now eagerly waiting to watch me suffer. The answer is embarrassingly simple. I thought I was being helpful. It was about 4 months ago when I first heard about live streaming. My daughter had moved to Leeds for university, and we'd been struggling to stay in touch. She suggested we try some new platform where she could show me around her campus and I could give her virtual tours of home. I'm not great with technology, but I wanted to connect with her, so I signed up. The platform was called Streamlink, and it seemed straightforward enough. You could broadcast live to friends and family, or watch other people's streams if they made them public. I spent my first few weeks just watching travel vlogs and people cooking meals in their kitchens. Harmless stuff, the kind of content that made the internet feel like a friendlier place. I work night shifts, cleaning office buildings around Brighton. It's solitary work, which suits me fine, but it does get lonely sometimes. During my breaks, I'd watch these streams on my phone. People chatting while they worked, students showing their daily routines, families having dinner together. It felt like having company during the long, quiet hours. One night, I was cleaning a legal firm's offices when I received a notification that someone wanted to follow my account. The username was just a string of numbers and letters, but their profile showed they were interested in workplace environments. I accepted the follow request without thinking much about it. Probably someone else who worked night shifts, I figured. The next night, I got a message from the same account asking if I'd ever considered streaming during my work. They said they found workplace content relaxing and would be interested in watching someone clean offices. The message was polite, even complimentary about how peaceful night cleaning must be. They offered to pay me £20 per stream. £20 doesn't sound like much, but when you're on minimum wage and trying to help your daughter with university expenses, it's significant. I was hesitant at first. Streaming while working seemed unprofessional. But then I reasoned that I was only cleaning, and the buildings were empty anyway. What harm could there be? I started with short streams, maybe 30 minutes, while I cleaned reception areas or break rooms. My one regular viewer seemed genuinely interested, making comments about cleaning techniques and asking questions about different office layouts. They were respectful, never asking personal questions or trying to get me to show anything inappropriate. Just someone who found routine, methodical work soothing to watch. After a few weeks, they asked if I'd be willing to stream while cleaning higher security areas, places like server rooms or document storage. They offered £50 per stream and explained they worked in office security and were interested in how cleaning staff navigated around sensitive equipment. The request seemed reasonable, and the money was too good to refuse. That's when things started feeling off. During these streams, my viewer would make very specific comments about the equipment I was near, or ask me to clean certain areas more thoroughly. Once, they asked me to focus the camera on a particular server rack while I worked around it. Another time, they wanted me to spend extra time near a filing cabinet marked confidential. I started noticing other changes too. My viewer count occasionally showed 2 or 3 people watching instead of just one, though only my original follower ever commented. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar usernames in the viewer list before they'd disappear. I told myself it was just a glitch in the platform. The requests grew more specific. Could I stream while cleaning the partners' offices? Could I make sure to clean around their desks thoroughly, showing any documents that might be left out? Could I adjust the camera angle to get a better view of computer screens that had been left on? Each request came with an increased payment offer. I should have stopped then, should have realized what was really happening. But the money was too useful, and I convinced myself I wasn't doing anything truly wrong. I wasn't stealing documents or accessing computers. I was just cleaning, and if people wanted to watch me do my job, that was their choice. One night, about 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was streaming while cleaning a law firm's conference room when I noticed something odd about the viewer count. Instead of the usual 2 or 3, it showed dozens of people watching, then hundreds, then thousands. The chat, which had always been just my one regular viewer making polite comments, exploded with activity. Messages were flying by too fast to read, but I caught fragments, coordinates, building layouts, security schedules. Someone was discussing the best times to enter the building. Another was sharing information about alarm systems. That's when I understood what my streams had really been used for. I wasn't providing relaxing content for lonely night shift workers. I was unknowingly conducting reconnaissance for criminals. Every office layout I'd shown, every security camera I'd inadvertently revealed, every keypad code I'd accidentally captured while unlocking doors, it had all been recorded and analyzed. I ended the stream immediately and tried to delete my account, but the platform wouldn't let me. Every time I attempted to log in, I received error messages. When I tried to create a new account to see what was happening, I found that my streams had been archived and were still available to view. My cleaning routes through multiple office buildings had been documented in detail. 2 days later, I received an email to my personal account from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my full name. The body contained a single link and the words, "You've been very helpful. Now it's time to give back to the community." The link led to a different website, not Streamlink, but something darker. The page showed what appeared to be a live feed from an empty room. Concrete walls, industrial lighting, a drain in the floor. In the corner was a viewer counter that showed thousands of people watching. Below that was a countdown timer, set to 3 days from then. I closed the browser and tried to pretend I'd never seen it. But over the next day, I kept receiving messages, text messages to my phone, which I'd never given to anyone associated with the platform. Emails to addresses I'd only used for personal things. Social media accounts I thought were private suddenly had friend requests from users with random number usernames. The messages all carried the same theme. I'd provided valuable services, and now I needed to fulfill my part of a larger agreement, an agreement I'd never knowingly made. They referenced specific details from my streams, which office building I was in on, which nights, what time I usually took my breaks, even what I typically ate for my midnight meal. I went to the police, but explaining the situation made me sound paranoid or potentially complicit in whatever crimes were being planned. A middle-aged cleaner claiming he'd accidentally helped criminals through innocent live streams. They took a report, but clearly thought I was either confused or trying to cover up involvement in something illegal. That's when the physical surveillance began. People following me to work, cars parked outside my flat, strangers in the cleaning supply store who seemed to know my schedule. One morning, I came home to find my front door unlocked and a note on my kitchen table with just an address and the word tomorrow. The address was for a warehouse on the outskirts of Brighton. I didn't go, obviously. Instead, I packed what I could carry and left town. I've been moving from place to place since then, staying in different guest houses and hostels, paying cash for everything. But they keep finding me. Hotel staff who recognize me despite using different names. Other guests who seem to know my routines. Maintenance workers who ask unusual questions about the buildings I'm staying in. Sometimes I'll return to my room to find that someone has been through my belongings, though nothing is ever taken. Yesterday, I found a small package in my backpack that I definitely didn't put there. Inside was a mobile phone, already switched on. The screen showed a familiar interface, Streamlink, with a notification that I had thousands of followers waiting for my next broadcast. There was also a countdown timer showing less than 2 days remaining. I'm writing this from an internet cafe in a town whose name I won't mention. The mobile phone is still with me because I'm afraid to throw it away. Every time I look at it, the follower count has increased. The comments section is active with messages I can't understand, references to locations, schedules, preparation. This morning, the phone rang. When I answered, there was no voice on the other end, just the sound of a streaming platform notification. Then text appeared on the screen. Final stream begins in 36 hours. Location details to follow. Failure to participate will result in consequences for family members. I haven't spoken to my daughter in Leeds for 3 weeks. I've been too afraid to contact her, worried that doing so might draw attention to her. But this morning, I received a photo message on the mysterious phone. It showed her walking to lectures, clearly taken without her knowledge. She looked tired and stressed, probably worried about not hearing from me. The most terrifying realization is that this was always the plan. The initial approach, the gradual increase in payment, the specific requests for certain areas. It was all designed to gather information while slowly drawing me deeper into something I couldn't escape from. They'd studied my financial situation, my relationship with my daughter, my work schedule. They knew exactly how to manipulate me. I keep thinking about how many other people might be involved in similar schemes without realizing it. Delivery drivers streaming their routes, security guards showing empty buildings at night, maintenance workers broadcasting from inside restricted areas, all thinking they're earning a bit of extra money through harmless content creation, not realizing they're providing reconnaissance for something much darker. The phone just vibrated with another notification. The stream is scheduled to begin tomorrow evening at a location that will be sent to me 6 hours beforehand. The viewer count now shows tens of thousands of people waiting, people who have been watching my every move for months, learning my routines, studying my vulnerabilities. I don't know what kind of stream they expect me to participate in, but given what I've learned about the platform's true purpose, I doubt it's anything I'd survive. The empty room with the concrete walls and the drain in the floor keeps appearing in my nightmares. I'm going to try to disappear again after posting this. Maybe if I can stay hidden long enough, they'll lose interest. Maybe they'll find another target. Maybe my daughter will be safe if I just vanish completely. But I'm not optimistic. They've proven they can track me anywhere, through any means. They have resources I can't understand and reach I can't escape. And they have something that makes escape impossible: leverage over the people I care about. If you ever get approached to start streaming your work, no matter how innocent it seems, please think carefully about what you might inadvertently be revealing. The people watching might not be who they claim to be. The request might seem reasonable at first, but lead somewhere much darker. The countdown on the phone now shows less than 30 hours. I need to move again, but I'm running out of places to hide, and running out of hope that I can somehow break free from this nightmare I accidentally created. One innocent stream led to this. One decision to earn a bit of extra money has put me and my daughter in danger. All because I wanted to help someone who claimed to find workplace cleaning relaxing to watch. The viewer count keeps growing. They're all waiting for tomorrow's final stream, waiting to see what happens to the helpful cleaner who showed them exactly how to break into the buildings where he worked. I should never have accepted that first follow request. I never meant to hurt anyone. That's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The knowledge that someone was harmed because I clicked a button on my screen. I was just trying to expose the truth, to prove that the dark web wasn't as dangerous as everyone claimed. Instead, I became exactly what I was trying to disprove: another horror story about the consequences of digital curiosity. I'm writing this down now because I need someone to understand what happened, even if I can never tell anyone I know. My therapist thinks I'm suffering from some kind of psychotic break, that the nightmares and panic attacks are manifestations of underlying trauma unrelated to anything I actually did. How could I possibly explain to her that I accidentally triggered someone's death from behind my computer screen? She'd have me sectioned within the hour. 3 years ago, I was studying digital media at university in Manchester. I'd always been fascinated by internet subcultures and online security, so much so that I'd started a small YouTube channel dedicated to debunking tech myths and urban legends. Nothing major, just a few thousand subscribers who enjoyed watching me explain why various scary internet stories weren't actually true. I covered things like cursed video games, creepypastas, and supposed haunted websites, always taking a rational, evidence-based approach to show there was nothing to fear. Then I decided to tackle the ultimate internet boogeyman: red rooms on the dark web. For those who don't know, red rooms are supposedly live streams where viewers can watch and even interact with real torture and murder. They've been a persistent urban legend for years, with countless stories of people stumbling across them while browsing the dark web. Almost every credible source will tell you they don't actually exist, that the technical limitations of the Tor network make live streaming nearly impossible, and that they're just another internet myth designed to scare people away from the dark web. That's what I believe too. I'd spent enough time on the dark web for research purposes to know that most of it was just unindexed websites, drug marketplaces, and forums for people who wanted extra privacy. Nothing like the horror show most people imagined. So I planned to make the ultimate debunking video. I would go on the dark web, attempt to find these supposed red rooms, and show my viewers that they were either fake, pre-recorded videos, or simply didn't exist at all. I set up multiple layers of security, VPNs, a dedicated laptop that I'd never used for personal information, even a virtual machine as an extra precaution. I installed screen recording software to capture my exploration, planning to edit it down to show how unscary the dark web really was. I spent weeks researching, gathering links from various forums and chat rooms where people claimed to have found entrances to these mythical red rooms. Most of the links were dead ends, as I expected. Some led to obvious scams asking for Bitcoin payments to access content that probably didn't exist. Others were clearly fake sites with staged photos or clips from horror movies. Exactly what I anticipated finding. After about 2 weeks of recording these uneventful explorations, I was nearly ready to compile my video and declare red rooms officially debunked. Then I received a message on one of the dark web forums I'd been frequenting for research. The user, who went by a string of numbers rather than a name, claimed to have access to a real red room. They said it wasn't advertised publicly because it catered to a very exclusive clientele, but they could provide me with temporary access if I was interested. Of course, I was skeptical. This was exactly the kind of thing people claimed happened right before they were scammed or hacked. But for the sake of thoroughness, I decided to follow this lead to its inevitable disappointing conclusion. I responded that I was interested, expecting to be asked for payment or personal information that would confirm it was a scam. Instead, the user sent me a long, complex URL and instructions to access it at exactly 3 a.m. GMT the following night. No payment required, no registration. Just a warning that I should not interact with anything on the site unless instructed to do so by the moderators. I almost didn't follow through. Something about the specificity of the time and the warning made me uneasy. But I reminded myself that this was exactly the kind of dramatic setup that fed into the myth of red rooms. It was theatrical, designed to build anticipation and fear, perfect for my debunking video. So at 2:55 a.m., I sat at my desk with my screen recorder running, multiple security measures in place, and navigated to the URL I'd been given. The site loaded slowly, normal for the Tor network, and initially appeared to be just a black screen. For a moment, I thought I'd been given a dud link after all. Then text appeared, verification in progress. A loading bar crawled across the screen, and I figured this was just more theatre, a way to build tension before revealing whatever fake content or scam lay on the other side. At exactly 3 a.m., the screen changed. A video feed appeared, showing what looked like a basement or cellar. The space was dimly lit with a reddish light, hence the name Red Room, I supposed. In the center was a person tied to a chair, hooded, wearing what appeared to be ordinary clothes, jeans, and a dark shirt. The video quality was surprisingly good, much better than I'd expected possible through Tor. That was my first clue that something wasn't right. My heart started racing as I tried to determine if what I was seeing was real or staged. There were no visible injuries on the person, no blood, nothing that immediately screamed, "This is actually happening." But there was something about the way they moved. Small, frightened movements, the rise and fall of their chest as they breathed rapidly, that felt unnervingly authentic. On the right side of the screen was a simple user interface with various buttons and commands. Some were labeled with actions like cut, burn, shock. Others were more administrative: camera angle, sound on off, vote. At the bottom was a chat window where I could see messages scrolling by. Usernames I didn't recognize commenting on the stream and apparently placing votes for what should happen next. I told myself it had to be an elaborate hoax. The technical limitations alone should have made this impossible. Maybe it was pre-recorded footage with an interactive interface overlaid to create the illusion of a live stream. Or perhaps actors performing for the camera. I'd seen similar setups in alternate reality games and viral marketing campaigns. Still recording my screen for the debunking video, I began to take notes on all the elements that proved this couldn't be real. The video quality was too good for Tor. The interface was too clean and responsive. The timing of the show starting exactly at 3 a.m. was too theatrical. As I was writing these observations, a notification appeared on the screen. New user detected. Verification required for viewing privileges. A button appeared labeled Verify. I hesitated, worrying about malware or being tracked. But I reminded myself of all my security precautions and figured this was just another part of the performance. So I clicked it, expecting a payment page or a fake login screen. Instead, the interface changed slightly. Now I had access to some of the buttons that had been grayed out before. A message appeared in the chat. New verified viewer, welcome. The moderator, whose username was just an anonymous string of characters, sent a private message in a separate window. First-time viewers must participate to maintain access. Select a command within 60 seconds. A countdown timer appeared at the top of my screen. I froze, unsure what to do. This was going further than I expected for a fake site. I decided to try something minimal, something that would comply with their game without causing harm if by some remote chance this was real. I hovered over the camera angle button, thinking it was the most innocuous option. But as the timer counted down, my hand trembled slightly, and I accidentally clicked on a button labeled Execute instead. The screen immediately flashed red, and the chat window exploded with activity. Messages scrolled by too quickly to read, but the tone seemed to be surprise and excitement. The moderator's message window updated. Execution command confirmed. Premium action selected by new user. Proceeding immediately. A new figure entered the frame, wearing a black mask and gloves. They moved with purposeful efficiency toward the bound person, who began struggling frantically against their restraints. The masked figure produced what looked like a handgun. pressed it against the back of the hooded person's head, and without hesitation, pulled the trigger. The sound was off, but I didn't need to hear it to understand what I'd just witnessed. The body slumped forward, dark liquid splattered across the floor and wall, and the masked figure stepped back, turning toward the camera, as if acknowledging the viewers. I slammed my laptop shut in horror, too shocked to process what had happened. Had I just watched someone die? Had I somehow caused it by clicking that button? It couldn't be real. It had to be an elaborate fake, a sick prank designed to frighten people who went looking for red rooms. But deep down, I knew. There was something unmistakably real about the way the body had moved, then gone still. Something about the splatter pattern that no special effects team would get exactly right. I deleted the screen recording immediately, then wiped my hard drive completely. I got rid of the laptop, broke it apart, and disposed of the pieces in different bins across the city. I deleted my YouTube channel and all social media accounts connected to it. I told my subscribers I'd received threats and needed to step away for my safety. Not entirely untrue. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every unexpected sound, convinced someone was coming for me. I checked news reports obsessively for any stories about missing persons or mysterious deaths, but found nothing I could definitively connect to what I'd seen. Eventually, the acute panic faded, replaced by a persistent, low-grade dread that never fully disappears. I switched universities, moved to a different city, changed my field of study. I avoid anything related to internet security or the dark web. I never record my screen for any reason, but sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still see that button on my screen. I still feel the slight tremor in my hand that moved the cursor just a few pixels to the right. I still wonder about the person in that chair, who they were, if anyone is looking for them, if they would still be alive if I hadn't been so determined to prove how safe and rational the internet really was. I don't know if red rooms exist for everyone, or if I somehow stumbled into something unique and terrible. I don't know if what I saw was real, or an elaborate hoax designed to make me believe I'd caused someone's death. But I do know that I'll never again assume I understand the full extent of human cruelty or the true depths of the internet. So if you're reading this, please learn from my mistake. Some things aren't worth investigating, even to prove they don't exist. Some corners of the internet should remain unexplored. And if you ever find yourself staring at a screen with a countdown timer and commands you don't fully understand, close it, walk away. Because sometimes curiosity doesn't just kill the cat. Sometimes it makes you the killer. You know that scraping sound? Metal against metal. It gets me every time. It doesn't matter if it's just someone dragging a bin across the pavement or a car door shutting too hard. My body reacts before my brain can catch up. Heart racing, sweating instantly, muscles tensing up like I'm about to fight or run. It's been 16 months since I got out of that shipping container, but honestly, I don't think I'll ever really get out. Not completely. Part of me is still in there watching that screen, waiting for the next sick instruction to appear. I've tried therapy, meditation, even moved to a completely different city, but some things just stick with you, you know. I was working as a delivery driver back then, mostly doing long-haul routes across the Midlands. Not the most exciting job, but it paid decent money and kept me moving, which I've always preferred to being stuck in one place. The company I worked for wasn't exactly top tier, the kind that would take on jobs other companies rejected due to tight deadlines or unusual delivery locations. I didn't ask questions, just drove where the dispatcher told me and collected my pay at the end of the week. That particular day started normally enough. I'd been assigned a pickup at this industrial estate outside Birmingham. One of those sprawling concrete landscapes filled with identical warehouses and not enough signs. The GPS coordinates I'd been given led me to a section that seemed less maintained than the rest, with fewer operational businesses and more abandoned units boarded up with metal sheets. I remember thinking it was odd, but figured it was probably just some startup using cheap space or a business in the process of relocating. When I arrived at the exact location, there was nothing but a solitary shipping container sitting in what had once been a loading bay for a warehouse. No office, no staff, not even proper lighting. Just this standard metal container, painted that typical rust-resistant blue you see everywhere. I double-checked the address, called dispatch to confirm, and was told to proceed with the pickup as planned. The manifest listed the contents as electronic testing equipment, bound for a research facility up north. Weight was given as approximately 200 kilos, nothing unusual for the type of deliveries I typically handled. I backed my truck up to the container as best I could in the awkward space. No one appeared to help with loading, which wasn't entirely unusual for these outlying pickups. Sometimes clients would leave items ready to go with paperwork attached, especially for after-hours collections. What was strange was the lack of any paperwork on or near the container. No shipping labels, no manifest, not even a padlock securing it, just a simple latch that anyone could open. As I approached to check if there might be documents inside, I noticed a small digital keypad mounted next to the container doors that I hadn't spotted from the truck. It looked newer than the container itself, with a glowing blue display asking for a 6-digit code. I hadn't been given any code by dispatch, so I called in again. The dispatcher seemed confused, put me on hold for several minutes, then returned to tell me the client had just sent over the access code 789021 and apologized for the oversight. I punched in the numbers and the keypad emitted a soft beep before the display changed to access granted. There was a mechanical click and the container door released slightly, swinging open just enough for me to see it was dark inside. I used my phone torch to peer in, expecting to find crates of equipment that I'd need to load onto my truck. Instead, my light revealed a space that had been converted into something else entirely. Not a storage unit, but what looked like a makeshift room. The interior walls had been covered with some sort of sound-dampening material, dark and textured. A simple cot was bolted to one wall. A small chemical toilet sat in one corner. Most bizarrely, mounted on the far wall was a large flat-screen monitor, currently dark but clearly operational based on the small power light glowing at its base. I hesitated at the threshold, that first real twinge of unease creeping up my spine. This clearly wasn't any electronic equipment for delivery. Part of me knew I should close the door, call dispatch again, or even the police, and leave immediately. But curiosity pushed me forward, that fatal human flaw that leads us into situations we should avoid. I wanted to understand what I was looking at, to make sense of the discrepancy between what I'd been told and what I was seeing. I stepped fully inside, sweeping my torch around to better examine the strange setup. That's when I heard the door behind me swing shut with a metallic groan, followed by the definitive click of a lock engaging. I spun around, dropping my phone in my panic, plunging the space into near total darkness, save for the dim light coming from my phone on the floor. I lunged for the door, pulling at the handle that no longer yielded to pressure. I pounded on the metal, shouting for help, though I knew the industrial estate was largely deserted, especially at that hour. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small camera mounted in the upper corner of the container, its red recording light now active and tracking my movements. Almost simultaneously, The monitor on the wall flickered to life, illuminating the container with a harsh blue glow. The screen displayed what appeared to be a loading symbol, rotating slowly against a black background. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, text appeared on the screen. "Welcome, participant number 24. Please remain calm. Your cooperation ensures your survival." My first thought was that this had to be some elaborate prank. Maybe one of those extreme reality shows where they put people in stressful situations for entertainment. I even said as much aloud, telling whoever was watching that I wasn't interested in participating and wanted to be released immediately. The screen remained unchanged, the message glowing mockingly in the darkness. Then I heard another sound that sent ice through my veins, movement outside the container. Someone else was there. Before I could process what this might mean, a different mechanical sound came from the opposite end of the container. Not the doors I'd entered through, but what I'd assumed was just the solid back wall. A section of it was sliding open, revealing another compartment of the container that had been hidden from view. In the dim blue light from the screen, I could make out a figure huddled in that newly revealed space. A man, maybe mid-30s, looking as terrified and confused as I felt. He was trembling visibly, his clothes dirty and torn, with what appeared to be dried blood on his sleeve. Most disturbingly, his wrist bore raw marks suggesting he had been restrained recently. The screen changed again, now displaying two columns with our apparent designations: participant number 24 and participant number 23. Below this appeared new text. "The game is simple. One must harm the other according to viewer instructions. Refusal results in punishment for both. Completion results in freedom for one." As if to emphasize the seriousness of these instructions, small panels in the ceiling slid open, and what looked like gas nozzles descended slightly. The message was clear: cooperate or suffer consequences. I tried to communicate with the other man to suggest we find a way out together, but he seemed beyond rational thought, curled into himself and rocking slightly. I couldn't blame him. Based on his appearance, he'd been in this nightmare longer than I had. The screen updated again, now showing a split view. One side displayed the interior of our container from the camera's perspective, while the other showed what appeared to be a chat window filling with messages. With dawning horror, I realized we were being broadcast somewhere online, likely the dark web, based on the anonymous usernames and the disturbing nature of the comments scrolling past. These weren't just viewers, but paying customers placing requests for what they wanted to see happen between us. A timer appeared in the corner of the screen, 10 minutes, counting down. Below it, highlighted in red: first challenge, participant number 24 must draw blood from participant number 23. Viewers choose method. The wall beside the monitor slid open to reveal a recessed panel containing various implements: a hammer, pliers, a box cutter, scissors. Tools that in any other context would be mundane, but in this setting became instruments of torture. I refused, of course, stood my ground, and shouted at the camera that I wouldn't participate in this sick game. The other man watched me with a mixture of hope and resignation that suggested he'd seen this scenario play out before. When the timer reached 8 a.m., a warning appeared. Compliance expected. Final warning. I maintained my refusal, believing, perhaps naively, that whoever was behind this would eventually realize I couldn't be coerced. At 7:30, a fine mist began spraying from the ceiling nozzles. The effect was almost instantaneous. A burning sensation on exposed skin, quickly intensifying to something beyond pain, beyond description. It felt like being flayed alive, nerve endings simultaneously on fire and exposed to ice. Both of us were screaming, clawing at our skin for relief that wouldn't come. After 15 seconds that felt like years, the spray stopped. The timer had paused at 7:15. New text appeared. Demonstration complete. Proceed with challenge or full deployment will follow. In that moment, something fundamental broke inside me. The absolute isolation of our situation became crystal clear. We were truly alone, at the mercy of unseen viewers who were deriving entertainment from our suffering. No help was coming, no rescue. Just the cold calculation of whether compliance would cause less suffering than resistance. I wish I could tell you I maintained my moral stance, that I continued to refuse despite the consequences. That would make for a more heroic story. But pain has a way of rewiring your principles, of reducing complex ethical frameworks to the simple binary of relief versus suffering. I moved toward the panel of tools, my movements mechanical and disconnected from my consciousness, as if watching someone else control my body. I selected the scissors, somehow seeming the least brutal option among monstrous choices. The other man didn't resist or try to fight me. He simply extended his arm, his eyes vacant, already knowing the routine of this horrific theater. I made the smallest cut I could on his forearm, just enough to draw the blood required by the challenge. A chime sounded from the screen, the timer stopped, and new text appeared. Challenge completed. Viewer satisfaction, 37%. Higher satisfaction increases freedom probability. That was just the beginning. What followed was a descent into nightmare that lasted for what I later learned was 3 days, but felt like weeks. The challenges escalated in their cruelty and specificity, each one presented with the same clinical detachment. Each refusal met with that unbearable chemical spray or other punishments. Extreme temperatures, deafening noise, electric shocks delivered through the metal floor. The viewers grew more numerous as our show apparently gained popularity in whatever dark corner of the internet it was being broadcast. Their requests became more specific, more depraved. And with each challenge, the viewer satisfaction rating became the metric by which our value was measured. The most horrific aspect wasn't the physical pain, though that was substantial. It was the way the system gradually turned us against each other, transforming us from potential allies into instruments of each other's suffering. With each hour, I could feel my humanity being systematically stripped away, replaced by a desperate animal focused only on avoiding the next punishment, on ensuring that if someone had to suffer more, it would be him instead of me. On what I believe was the third day, something changed. The challenges had been escalating toward what was clearly intended to be a fatal conclusion, the ultimate entertainment for the viewers. The screen displayed our final challenge with brutal simplicity. Conclusion. Phase. Only one participant exits. Viewers will determine method. As the voting commenced, visible on the screen as percentages next to various lethal options, I noticed something unprecedented, a fluctuation in the power. The lights on the camera briefly dimmed and the screen flickered. Something was happening outside our controlled environment. Moments later, there was a commotion outside the container, muffled shouting, the sound of multiple vehicles arriving. The screen went black, plunging us into darkness. Then came the sound of metal tools against the container doors, the screech of the locking mechanism being forced open from the outside. I later learned that our location had been traced through a combination of police work and grey hat hackers who who had infiltrated the streaming platform. An international task force had been tracking this operation for months. A sophisticated network that abducted people from various locations, placing them in identical shipping containers around the country for these brutal broadcasts. The aftermath has been its own kind of nightmare. Physical recovery, psychological evaluations, police interviews, where I had to recount every degrading detail, every moment when I chose my survival over someone else's suffering. The other man, I learned his name was Adrian, that he had been a warehouse worker who disappeared 3 weeks before I was taken. Didn't survive the medical evacuation. His body had simply endured too much trauma over his longer captivity. The police identified 13 other containers across the UK, each set up identically, each containing similar scenarios in various stages. Most of the victims were already dead. Those who survived bear the same hollow look I now see in my own reflection. People who have glimpsed humanity's darkest potential and can never unsee it. The operators of the site were never fully identified. The broadcasting equipment was sophisticated, but designed to leave minimal digital footprints. The money trail led through so many cryptocurrencies and shell accounts that it eventually went cold. The most the authorities could tell me was that the viewership had been global and substantial, with thousands paying premium rates to watch and influence our torment. I now live in a different city, under a different name. I work from home, avoiding public transportation and open spaces. I've sealed every vent in my flat, installed multiple locks on all doors and windows. I sleep with the lights on when I sleep at all. Because the most terrifying aspect of what happened isn't the physical pain I endured or the nightmares that continue to plague me. It's the knowledge that there are people, ordinary people with jobs and families and seemingly normal lives, who would pay to watch strangers torture each other. People who would take pleasure in voting for which fingers should be broken first or how deep a cut should be. People who walk among us every day, carrying this capacity for calculated cruelty behind unremarkable faces. Sometimes I find myself studying strangers on the rare occasions I venture outside, wondering if they were among the viewers, if they voted on methods to hurt me, if they were disappointed when the broadcast was interrupted before its intended conclusion. And in my darkest moments, I wonder about the viewing statistics that were displayed on that screen, how the satisfaction rating increased when I became more brutal, more creative in following their instructions. I wonder about the moment when I stopped hesitating before causing pain, when part of me began anticipating the next challenge with something other than dread. Because the true horror of that shipping container wasn't just being locked inside with someone tasked to mutilate me. It was discovering how quickly I became that someone for him in return, and how much of that person still lives inside me, waiting for the next instruction to appear on a screen. It's been 3 months since that night on my couch, and I still haven't used my laptop properly since. I've bought a new one actually. I just couldn't bring myself to even turn the old one on again. Some things you just can't unsee, and what I found in my own bookmarks folder still gives me nightmares. I've always been a bit of a tech hoarder. I'm the type who never deletes emails, keeps screenshots of everything, and has about 50 tabs open at once. My friends always joke about it, how I'll save articles I'll never read and bookmark pages just in case, but never actually go back to them. It's not like I'm disorganized exactly, just reluctant to get rid of things. My digital life is a bit like my flat in that way, cluttered but with a system that makes sense to me. I work in IT support for a small company in Sheffield. Not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills, and I genuinely enjoy solving technical problems. I'd been with the company for about 4 years at this point, and part of my job involved testing different browsers and tools to make recommendations for our staff. That's my excuse for why I had so many random programs installed on my laptop anyway. That Friday night in January, I was just lounging on my couch with a beer, scrolling through Netflix, but not really finding anything worth watching. It was freezing outside, one of those damp, cold Yorkshire nights where the chill seems to seep through the walls. I'd pulled my favorite blanket over me and had the heating cranked up, just feeling a bit bored and restless. I decided to finally sort through my digital clutter, something I'd been putting off for ages. It felt like a productive way to waste time, if that makes sense. I started with my email, 16,000 unread messages, got overwhelmed immediately, and switched to something easier, my browser bookmarks. I use Chrome as my main browser, but I also had Firefox, Edge, and a few others installed for work purposes. I decided to go through them all, starting with the ones I rarely used. When I opened Firefox, I was surprised to see how many bookmarks I had in there. I barely even used this browser except occasionally for testing things. The bookmark folders were pretty standard at first: work resources, recipes I'll never make, holiday research from a trip I'd planned 2 years ago. But then I noticed one simply labeled utility tools. I didn't remember creating it, but that wasn't unusual. I'm always saving random software tools and then forgetting about them. When I clicked on the folder, there were only about 5 bookmarks inside. Most were what you'd expect: a password manager, a file conversion tool, some kind of coding resource. But the last one caught my eye because it didn't have a proper name, just a string of random characters followed by .onion. I'm tech savvy enough to recognize an onion address when I see one. It's a dark web address, the kind you need the Tor browser to access. But I didn't remember ever saving anything from the dark web. I'd heard about it, of course, and was curious about it, like most people in my field, but I'd never actually gone through the effort of exploring it myself. What was strange was that Firefox shouldn't even be able to open onion addresses without being configured specially. I figured maybe I'd set it up years ago and forgotten about it, or maybe the bookmark was just copied from somewhere as a reference. Out of curiosity, I clicked it, fully expecting to get an error message. Instead, a loading screen appeared. My heart did this weird little jump in my chest. Firefox shouldn't be able to do this. It shouldn't be connecting to an onion address. I'd never installed Tor or configured any special proxies on this browser. At least, I didn't think I had. Before I could process what was happening, the page loaded. It was a simple black background with what looked like a video player in the center. No text, no navigation, nothing else on the page. Just a video player showing what appeared to be a still image of an empty room, some kind of basement or storage area with concrete walls. There was a timestamp in the corner showing the current date and time. I remember sitting up straighter, the blanket falling off my shoulders, suddenly very alert. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it wasn't actually a dark website, just something designed to look mysterious. I moved my cursor to close the window, but then the image on screen shifted slightly. It wasn't a still image, it was a video feed, and someone had just walked into frame. The figure was mostly in shadow, but I could make out a person moving around what looked like a workbench against one wall. They seemed to be arranging items, though I couldn't clearly see what they were. Something about the deliberate, methodical movements made the hairs on my arms stand up. This didn't feel like some random webcam feed or art project. There was purpose in those movements. I should have closed the browser immediately. Any sensible person would have. But there's this moment of paralysis that comes with seeing something so unexpected. Your brain needs to catch up, to make sense of what you're witnessing before you can react. The figure turned slightly, and light from somewhere off camera illuminated their face. or what should have been their face. They were wearing a plain white mask with just eye holes cut out. The kind of thing you might find in a craft shop, meant for decoration. The contrast of that blank white face against the shadowy room made my stomach clench. As they turned further, I could finally see what they had been arranging on the workbench. Tools, knives, pliers, what looked like surgical equipment, all laid out with careful precision. Next to them was something that looked disturbingly like restraints. That's when the reality of what I might be watching hit me. This wasn't just some weird art project or practical joke. This looked like preparation for something terrible. And somehow, inexplicably, I had a bookmark to it in my browser. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I got up and paced around my flat, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. How could I have a bookmark to something like that? I never visit the dark web. And how was Firefox even able to access an Onion address? After about 20 minutes of panic, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had used my laptop at some point, but I rarely let anyone borrow it. Could it have been a virus or some kind of malware that added the bookmark? But why would malware direct me to what looked like a live stream? I needed to check if what I saw was real. I opened my laptop again, but this time I didn't click the bookmark. Instead, I looked at its properties. The bookmark had been created 8 months earlier, according to the metadata. 8 months. I tried to remember what was happening in my life then, who might have had access to my computer. Then I remembered. About 8 months ago, my laptop had been stolen from my car. I'd reported it to the police, but miraculously, it had been recovered a week later. Found in a skip behind a shopping center across town. Nothing seemed to be missing or damaged, and I'd run antivirus scans that came up clean. I'd assumed the thief had just taken it, realized it was password protected, and dumped it. But what if they had installed something on it first? What if they had configured Firefox to access the dark web and left that bookmark deliberately? The thought made me feel physically ill. I'd been using this laptop for 8 months without realizing someone had tampered with it. What else might they have installed? Were they monitoring me? Had I been an unknowing participant in whatever disturbing thing I'd just witnessed? I couldn't bring myself to check the bookmark again. Instead, I shut down my laptop completely, unplugged it, and shoved it under my couch, as if putting it out of sight would somehow make what I'd seen less real. The next day, I took the laptop to a friend who works in cybersecurity. I didn't tell him exactly what I'd seen, just that I'd found strange bookmarks I didn't recognize, and suspected my laptop had been compromised when it was stolen. He offered to wipe it completely and reinstall the operating system, which I gratefully accepted. When he was examining it before the wipe, he found something that chilled me to the bone. There was indeed a hidden configuration that allowed Firefox to connect to the Tor network. But more disturbing was a small program running in the background that seemed to be taking periodic screenshots and accessing my webcam. The timestamp showed it had been active since shortly after my laptop had been recovered. For 8 months, someone might have been watching me through my own laptop. Someone who was connected to whatever horrible thing I had glimpsed on that live stream. I've since bought a new laptop and taken every security precaution imaginable. I cover my webcam, use a VPN, and regularly check for any unusual software or connections. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched somehow. What keeps me up at night isn't just what I saw, or even the knowledge that someone had access to my computer for months. It's the question of why. Why put that bookmark there? Was it a mistake? Or was it deliberate? A way to show me they could access my personal space anytime they wanted. Were they trying to recruit me into whatever disturbing activity they were preparing for? Or was I somehow meant to be a future participant in a much more terrifying way? I'll never know for sure. And maybe that's the most disturbing part of all. That bookmark wasn't just a random link. It was a window into something dark that had been hiding in my own digital space for months, silently watching and waiting. If someone told you that ordering a pizza could ruin your life, you'd probably laugh. I would have too, until 3 months ago. Now, I'm sitting in a Greasy Spoon cafe in Blackpool at midnight, watching every person who walks through the door and wondering which one might be here for me. Tomorrow marks exactly 90 days since I saw something I shouldn't have seen, and apparently that's significant to the people who've been watching me ever since. I'm a delivery driver for Domino's in Manchester. Have been for about 2 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and gives me flexible hours while I try to figure out what to do with my life. Most nights are routine. Pick up orders, follow the sat-nav, hand over food, collect payment, move on to the next address. You develop a rhythm. You stop really thinking about the job and just go through the motions. The night everything changed started like any other. Friday evening rush, orders backing up, everyone wanting food delivered to their homes or offices. I'd been doing runs for about 4 hours when I got an order for an industrial estate on the outskirts of Salford. It wasn't unusual. Lots of businesses operate out of those converted warehouses, and people working late shifts often order in. The address led me to a nondescript building with a loading bay and a few cars parked outside. The order was for 6 large pizzas, which suggested either a late meeting or people pulling an all-nighter. I rang the number provided, and someone told me to bring the food to a side entrance marked Studio B. They said the door would be propped open. When I found the entrance, the door was indeed ajar. I called out that I had a delivery but got no response. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, and I could hear sounds deeper in the building, voices, movement, electronic equipment humming. I followed the sounds, carrying the pizza bags, assuming I'd find whoever had ordered the food. The corridor led to another door that was slightly open. Through the gap, I could see bright lighting and what looked like filming equipment. I knocked and announced the delivery again, but the sounds from inside continued without acknowledgement. Thinking they might not have heard me over their work, I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. I found myself in a converted warehouse space set up like a film studio. Professional lighting rigs, multiple cameras on tripods, computer monitors showing different camera angles. But what I saw in the center of the room made me freeze. There was a person strapped to a metal table, conscious but clearly distressed. Around them stood several people wearing surgical masks and disposable coveralls. One was adjusting camera angles, while another was checking what appeared to be medical instruments laid out on a nearby tray. Off to one side, someone was monitoring multiple computer screens showing chat windows and what looked like payment processing interfaces. The whole scene had a clinical, organized quality that made it somehow more disturbing than if it had appeared chaotic or improvised. These people knew exactly what they were doing. This was planned, prepared, professional. I must have made a sound, dropped the pizza bags or gasped, because suddenly everyone in the room turned to look at me. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of them, a woman in scrubs, walked toward me very calmly. She asked if I was the food delivery, as if finding me there was perfectly normal. I mumbled something about the pizzas and started backing toward the door, but she gestured for me to wait. She explained that they were filming a medical training video and didn't want to break character. She asked me to leave the food by the door and said they'd sort out payment later. Her manner was so casual, so reasonable, that for a moment I almost believed her explanation. But then I glanced at the monitors showing the chat windows. Messages were scrolling by too fast to read properly, but I caught fragments about blood, slow cutting, and increase the payment. These weren't medical training discussions, and the person on the table wasn't acting. Their fear was real. I left the pizzas and backed out of the room, my heart hammering. In the corridor, I could hear the woman talking to the others, though I couldn't make out words. I walked quickly back to my car, trying to process what I'd witnessed. Part of me wondered if I'd misunderstood the situation. Maybe it was an elaborate movie set or some kind of extreme performance art. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to decide what to do. I considered calling the police immediately, but what would I tell them? That I'd seen people in medical attire around someone on a table. That seemed like filming equipment. Without clear evidence of an actual crime in progress, I wasn't sure they'd take me seriously. Instead, I decided to finish my shift and report it the next day, when I could think clearly about exactly what I'd witnessed. I drove away from the industrial estate, completed my remaining deliveries, and went home. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that person on the table and those clinical, organized preparations. The next morning, I called the police and reported what I'd seen. They took my statement and said they'd investigate. I gave them the address, described the setup, explained why I thought something illegal might have been happening. The officer seemed to take it seriously and said they'd follow up with me. 2 days later, they called to tell me they'd visited the location. The building was empty. No equipment, no furniture, no evidence that anything had taken place there. The property manager said the space had been vacant for several months. There was no record of anyone renting studio space or filming permits being issued. The police seemed to think I'd either gotten the wrong address or misunderstood what I'd seen. They suggested that stress from working late shifts might have caused me to misinterpret an innocent situation. The investigation was closed, but I knew what I'd seen, and apparently so did the people I'd interrupted. The first sign that they knew who I was came a week later. I received a pizza order on my delivery app, but when I arrived at the address, no one was home. The order had been paid for in advance, including a generous tip. Attached to the order was a note thanking me for my discretion and suggesting that some things were better left unreported. Over the following weeks, I noticed things that were individually small, but collectively unsettling. The same car appearing in my rearview mirror during multiple shifts. People photographing me while I made deliveries. Orders that would take me to locations where no one was waiting, but where I'd noticed someone watching from a distance. I started varying my routes home and taking different approaches to delivery addresses. But the surveillance continued. Sometimes subtle. A person reading a newspaper looked up as I passed. Sometimes more obvious. Cars following me for several streets before turning away. The most disturbing incident came about 6 weeks after that night. I received an order for my own address. When I checked the system, it showed my flat number, my postcode, everything correct. The order was for one large pizza, with a note in the special instructions field. You were very helpful that night. Hope you're enjoying your work. I didn't deliver to my own address, obviously. Instead, I called in sick for the rest of the week and stayed with a mate in Liverpool. But when I returned home, I found the pizza box outside my door anyway. Inside, instead of food, was a USB drive and a printed note with a web address. I almost threw it away without looking, almost convinced myself to ignore it and hope they'd lose interest. But something compelled me to check what was on the drive. perhaps hoping for evidence I could take to the police. The drive contained a single video file. When I played it, I recognized the same warehouse space I'd interrupted weeks earlier. But now the setup was different, more elaborate. Multiple camera angles showing a room prepared for what was clearly not a medical training exercise. In the corner of the video was a viewer counter showing thousands of people watching live. But what made my blood run cold was seeing myself in the footage. The video showed me entering the room with the pizza bags, surveying the scene, backing toward the door. My face was clearly visible. Someone had been filming the entire time, even during what I'd thought was an unexpected interruption. At the bottom of the video was text: "Witness recruitment successful. Training complete. Event scheduling in progress." I understood then that my stumbling across their operation hadn't been an accident. The pizza order, the open doors, the lack of response when I called out, it had all been orchestrated. They'd wanted someone to find them. They'd wanted a witness, and they'd specifically wanted me. I still don't understand why. Maybe they needed someone with regular access to different locations around the city. Maybe they wanted a delivery driver who already had reasons to be driving around at night. Maybe it was just random selection, and I was unlucky enough to be the one who picked up that particular order. Since then, the surveillance has intensified. I've spotted the same faces in different locations across Manchester. People who seem to know my schedule better than I do. I've received more mysterious pizza orders that lead nowhere, but now they come with messages about preparation phases and final scheduling. 3 days ago, I received the most explicit message yet. Another USB drive, this time delivered directly to my workplace. Inside was a video showing an empty room similar to the one I'd first discovered, but clearly in a different location. Concrete walls, better lighting, professional camera equipment, and in the corner, a countdown timer showing less than a week remaining. Below the video was an address in Blackpool and a date, tomorrow night. The message explained that my witness period was concluding and that it was time for me to transition to participant status. They provided details about travel arrangements, timing, and what they called viewer engagement protocols. They also mentioned that they'd identified my family members and knew their locations and routines. My sister in Leeds, my parents in their retirement flat, my nephew's school route. The implication was clear. Cooperation wasn't optional. I left Manchester immediately after receiving that message, took what cash I had and caught the first train to somewhere else. But Blackpool keeps calling to me. The address they provided, the appointment time tomorrow evening, the knowledge that thousands of people are already gathering online to watch whatever they have planned. I've tried going to different police stations in different cities, but without concrete evidence of immediate danger, and with my previous report having led nowhere, they treat me like someone having a mental health crisis. One officer suggested I seek counseling for work-related stress. The worst part is knowing that this whole system relies on witnesses like me, people who stumble into their operations and then become part of them. The cycle continues because each witness eventually becomes a participant, and each participant helps recruit the next witness. I think about that person I saw on the table months ago. Were they once a delivery driver who saw something they shouldn't have seen? A cleaner who walked into the wrong room? A maintenance worker who arrived at an inconvenient time? Everyone who ends up in those rooms probably started as an innocent bystander who witnessed something terrible. The counter on the latest video now shows tens of thousands of viewers waiting for tomorrow's event. People who've paid to watch, who can interact with what happens, who can influence the proceedings through their participation. I'm not just going to be a victim, I'm going to be entertainment, I keep thinking I should run further, get on another train, go to Scotland, leave the country if I can. But they found my family's information so easily. They tracked me across a city for months. How far could I really get before they'd find me again? The time is rapidly approaching. Less than 18 hours now. I should be terrified, but mostly I feel resigned. This was always where it was heading from the moment I walked into that warehouse with a pizza delivery. Everything since then has just been an extended preparation period, training me for this final role. Tomorrow night, thousands of people will watch me transition from witness to participant. The delivery driver who brought food to the wrong address will become the entertainment for those who've been preparing for this moment as long as I've been dreading it. I suppose I should have just left the pizzas in the corridor and walked away without investigating further. But curiosity has consequences, and sometimes the price of satisfying that curiosity is becoming the subject of someone else's. The countdown continues, the viewers await, and I still have a few hours to decide whether to run or to show up at that address tomorrow night. I haven't been able to look at medical scrub since it happened. That specific shade of blue-green sends me into a cold sweat every time I spot it in a hospital corridor or even on a TV show. The sound of rubber gloves snapping against wrists makes me physically ill. 3 years later, and my body still remembers everything my mind desperately tries to forget about wellness solutions. I was in my final year of nursing school when money got tight, like eating nothing but ramen for weeks tight. My student loans barely covered tuition, and London rent was bleeding me dry. I'd been picking up odd healthcare jobs through this app that connected medical students with private clinics needing temporary staff. Most gigs were straightforward, covering for staff on holiday, helping with administrative backlogs, that sort of thing. The pay was decent, the hours flexible around my classes. That's how I found the listing for wellness solutions. They needed someone for weekend overnight shifts, primarily monitoring post-operative patients and maintaining basic records. The pay was nearly triple what other clinics offered, a detail that should have raised red flags immediately. But when you're staring at an eviction notice and surviving on tea and toast, rational thinking takes a backseat to desperation. The clinic was located in one of those converted industrial buildings in East London, the kind that developers renovate into luxury spaces while keeping exposed brick and ductwork to seem trendy. From the outside, it looked professional enough. Clean signage, security cameras, proper access control. The reception area was minimalist but well appointed, with those uncomfortable designer chairs and abstract art that seems mandatory in private healthcare facilities. I remember my first impression being that everything seemed slightly off, but in ways I couldn't immediately identify. The medical equipment was top tier, higher quality than the teaching hospital where I trained. The monitoring systems were cutting edge, yet there was an emptiness to the place, an absence of the normal indicators of a functioning medical practice. No health education posters, no magazines in the waiting area, no photos of the medical team or credentials displayed, just sterile walls and an unnatural silence. The clinic director, Dr. Reynolds, though I later discovered that wasn't his real name, gave me a brief tour that first evening. He explained that Wellness Solutions specialized in aesthetic procedures for discerning international clients who value privacy. The explanation made enough sense. Plenty of wealthy people fly in for cosmetic surgery they don't want their social circles knowing about. He showed me the recovery rooms where patients would be sleeping, the monitoring station where I'd be based, and the basic charting system I'd used to record vital signs and medication administration. What struck me as unusual was how he explicitly instructed me never to enter the 3 operating theaters at the back of the clinic. He emphasized that they contained sensitive equipment calibrated for specific procedures, and that cleaning staff would handle those areas separately. At the time, I rationalized this as reasonable. I was hired for post-op care, not surgical assistance. My first few weekends passed uneventfully. Patients would already be in recovery when I arrived for my shift, sedated and bandaged. I'd check vital signs, administer prescribed medications, and document everything as required. Most patients were gone by morning, transferred to private recovery facilities, or, as I was told, luxury hotels where nurses would continue their care. I never saw the same patient twice. What began to unsettle me were the inconsistencies I noticed between the procedures listed in the charts and the actual conditions of the patients. A chart might indicate a routine rhinoplasty, but the patient would be heavily sedated with pain management more appropriate for major surgery. Someone listed as having undergone liposuction would have bandaging in areas that made no anatomical sense for fat removal. The medication protocols were often extreme. Immunosuppressants for cosmetic procedures, powerful antibiotics typically reserved for high-risk infections. Even more disturbing were the patient demographics. Despite the clinic supposedly catering to wealthy clients, many appeared malnourished or showed signs of long-term health neglect. Some had older surgical scars that looked nothing like professional medical work. Few had proper preoperative assessment documentation. When I cautiously questioned Dr. Reynolds about these discrepancies, he dismissed my concerns with vague references to international medical standards and reminded me that discretion was part of what I was being paid for. The turning point came about 2 months into my employment. I'd arrived for my usual shift to find the clinic unusually active for a Friday evening. Typically, surgeries were completed and patients settled before I arrived at 11 p.m. But that night, there were staff I'd never seen before, moving equipment and speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Reynolds informed me that they were preparing for a special case and that I should focus on the recovery rooms at the front of the clinic. Around midnight, curiosity got the better of me. The unusual activity had died down, and the clinic had returned to its characteristic silence. I decided to check the supply room near the restricted operating theaters, telling myself I needed to restock my cart, though in truth, I wanted to glimpse whatever special case had caused such disruption to the normal routine. As I approached the back hallway, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small room adjacent to Operating Theatre 1, its door slightly ajar. Inside was what appeared to be a sophisticated control room, with multiple monitors, broadcasting equipment, and what looked like payment processing terminals. One screen displayed what was unmistakably the interior of the operating theatre next door, currently empty, but fully prepped for a procedure. Another monitor showed what appeared to be a chat room or forum, with usernames I didn't recognize and messages in multiple languages. A third displayed a countdown timer, 00:37:14. Beside it was a cryptocurrency transaction log, amounts updating in real time next to usernames. The realization hit me with physical force. This wasn't just a private clinic performing discreet cosmetic surgery. This was a broadcasting studio, streaming live surgical procedures to paying viewers on the dark web. The international clients weren't the patients, they were the audience. As this horrific understanding washed over me, I heard footsteps approaching. I slipped into a nearby linen closet, heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would give me away. Through the slats in the door, I watched as Dr. Reynolds and two men in surgical attire wheeled a gurney toward Operating Theatre 1. The person on the gurney was conscious, but clearly terrified, attempting to move despite being partially restrained, making muffled sounds of distress through what appeared to be a medical-grade mouth covering. What happened next shifted my understanding of horror permanently. Dr. Reynolds paused by the control room, checking the monitors while explaining something to his companions. I caught fragments about viewer requests and premium packages and interactive options. One of the men adjusted a small earpiece and nodded toward the countdown timer, which now read 002943. They continued into the operating theatre, but not before I glimpsed the surgical tools laid out on trays beside the operating table. These weren't standard surgical instruments for any legitimate procedure I'd studied. Some I recognized from my training as being historically used in amputations or rarely performed surgeries. Others appeared modified, designed for purposes I couldn't and didn't want to imagine. I remained frozen in that linen closet, terrified of discovery, yet unable to leave without potentially being seen. Through the closet slats, I could see into the control room, where one of the monitors now showed the interior of Operating Theatre 1. The patient was being prepped, cameras adjusted for optimal viewing angles. Text appeared at the bottom of the screen, which I realized with growing nausea were viewer comments and requests being transmitted to the surgical team's earpieces. When the actual procedure began, I had to physically press my hand against my mouth to prevent any sound from escaping. What I witnessed wasn't surgery in any medical sense. It was methodical mutilation performed with clinical precision, broadcast to an audience that was actively directing aspects of the process through their payments and requests. The surgical team worked with the detached efficiency of people performing a job they'd done many times before, pausing occasionally as if receiving new instructions through their earpieces. I don't know how long I remained in that closet, unable to look away from the monitor yet desperate to unsee everything. Eventually, my survival instinct overrode my paralysis. I needed to escape, to report what I'd discovered. But to whom? The level of sophistication I'd witnessed suggested resources and connections beyond ordinary criminal operations. If this clinic had existed for any length of time, they likely had contingencies for exactly the situation I was in. My opportunity came when an alarm from one of the recovery rooms drew the attention of the staff member monitoring the control room. As he left to investigate, I slipped out of the closet and made my way toward the emergency exit, abandoning my belongings at the monitoring station where I should have been working. Just as I reached the exit, a hand gripped my arm. One of the surgical assistants I'd glimpsed earlier stood there, surgical mask pulled down to reveal a face that showed no surprise at finding me there. His expression wasn't angry or threatening. It was evaluating, calculating, as if I were a mathematical problem requiring solution. He explained in a conversational tone that I had witnessed their premium service, where select clients paid exceptional sums for customized procedures on volunteer subjects. He assured me the participants were compensated appropriately for their contribution to medical research and viewer education. When I expressed obvious disbelief, he offered to show me their consent documentation and payment structures, as if this would somehow normalize what I'd seen. As he spoke, maintaining his grip on my arm, I realized with growing horror that he wasn't trying to frighten or threaten me. He was recruiting me. He described how my nursing background made me an ideal addition to their team, how the compensation would dwarf anything legitimate healthcare could offer, how my student debt could be eliminated within months. His tone was that of a corporate headhunter offering a prestigious position, not a criminal proposing I join an enterprise broadcasting torture for profit. What terrified me most wasn't the gruesome surgery I'd witnessed, or even the immediate danger I was in. It was the momentary temptation I felt when he mentioned the money. For one fraction of a second, financial desperation made me consider what he was offering, and that brief weakness haunts me more than anything else about that night. I stammered something about needing time to think, trying to appear open to persuasion rather than horrified. He seemed satisfied with this, releasing my arm, but informing me that leaving immediately would appear suspicious to the others. He suggested I return to my monitoring station and complete my shift as normal. We could discuss terms tomorrow. After all, he pointed out, I was already involved simply by working there. I nodded, walking steadily back to my station while my mind raced through escape scenarios. Once there, I pretended to continue my work while surreptitiously gathering only what I absolutely needed: my phone, keys, and ID. I waited until I heard the operating theatre doors open, signaling the procedure had concluded. In the momentary commotion of post-operative activity, I slipped out through a side entrance used for supply deliveries. I ran without direction at first, simply needing to put distance between myself and that building. Eventually, I found myself at a 24-hour cafe where I tried to organize my thoughts and consider my options. Going to the police seemed obvious, but what evidence did I have beyond my testimony? I'd taken nothing from the clinic, no recordings, no patient information, nothing that could corroborate my account. And if this operation had the resources I suspected, how confident could I be that local law enforcement wasn't already compromised? In the end, I submitted an anonymous tip to both the Metropolitan Police and a medical regulatory body, providing the clinic's address and a brief description of what I'd witnessed. Then I withdrew from nursing school, emptied my meager bank account, and fled to my cousin's home in Edinburgh, where I remained for months, jumping at shadows and checking over my shoulder constantly. I learned later through news reports that Wellness Solutions had been permanently closed due to zoning violations. Less than a week after my escape, there was no mention of arrests, no investigation reported in the media. The building was quickly renovated and reopened as luxury apartments within months. When I finally worked up the courage to look into Dr. Reynolds, I discovered no medical professional by that name existed in any UK registry. 3 years later, I've rebuilt some semblance of a normal life. I completed my nursing degree at a different university and now work in pediatrics in a small community hospital, about as far from private aesthetic clinics as possible. I've moved multiple times, changed my phone number, deleted all social media. Normal precautions, I tell myself, though part of me knows they're probably unnecessary. If they wanted to find me, they likely could have by now. Sometimes I wonder if Wellness Solutions was unique or just one node in a larger network. How many other abandoned buildings or legitimate-seeming medical facilities house similar operations? How many other desperate students or healthcare workers have been drawn into that world, either knowingly or, like me, discovering the truth too late? I still receive emails occasionally from temporary healthcare staffing apps, listing private clinics seeking weekend help. Some offer remarkably generous compensation for simple overnight monitoring. I delete them immediately, but before I do, I sometimes find myself looking at the addresses, wondering how many other viewing rooms exist behind unremarkable facades, how many other special cases are broadcast to audiences willing to pay premium rates for custom modifications to unwilling bodies. The most disturbing thought the one that keeps me awake some nights, is wondering about those viewers, thousands of them, based on the counter I saw that night. People sitting at ordinary computers in ordinary homes, watching the unthinkable while perhaps sipping coffee or eating dinner. People who might be my neighbors, my colleagues, my patients' parents. People who look completely normal, but who feed a marketplace that transforms human suffering into entertainment at the right price. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if somewhere out there, someone is watching me through their screen, waiting for a performance they've already paid to enjoy. I haven't slept properly in about 3 weeks now, and I think I need to get this story off my chest. My friend suggested I should talk to someone professional about it. But how do you even begin to explain something like this without sounding completely insane? Or worse, having them report you to the police. I'm not even sure if I committed a crime or not, but I definitely saw something I shouldn't have, something I can't unsee. I'm a freelance content writer, have been for about 4 years now. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills and lets me work from home in my pajamas, which was always the dream. My schedule's pretty flexible, so I often end up working late into the night because I'm naturally a bit of a night owl. Why fight your body clock if you don't have to, right? About a month ago, I was struggling with a particularly boring article about home insurance. It was nearly 2 a.m., and I was desperate to finish it so I could invoice the client and be done with it. I'd been hearing all this buzz about AI writing tools, and I thought maybe they could help me get through this mind-numbing assignment faster. I wasn't looking to plagiarize or anything, just wanted some inspiration to break through my writer's block. I started looking into different AI writing tools online, comparing features and prices. Most of the mainstream ones seemed pretty expensive for what they offered, and I wasn't sure if they'd be worth the investment. Then I stumbled across this Reddit thread where people were discussing some newer, less-known tools that were supposedly more advanced. Someone mentioned one called NeuralScribe that wasn't as restricted as the mainstream ones and could generate more creative content. I was intrigued, partly because it was free during its beta testing phase, and partly because I was just so desperate to finish this article that I'd have tried anything. The website looked professional enough. Simple design, testimonials, the usual stuff. Looking back, I should have been more cautious, but it was late. I was tired, and I just wanted to get my work done. The interface was pretty straightforward. You could input a prompt, adjust some parameters like tone and style, and the AI would generate content based on that. I started with something simple, asking it to write an intro paragraph about the importance of home insurance. The result was decent, not amazing, but usable as a starting point. I tried a few more prompts related to my article, and it was helping me make progress. Then, just out of curiosity and procrastination, if I'm being honest, I decided to try something different. I've always been interested in horror stories, and I wondered how creative this AI could get. So I typed in, "Write a short horror story about the dark web." The loading icon spun for longer than usual, maybe 30 seconds or so. When the text finally appeared, it started off pretty standard as far as AI-generated content goes. It was a story about someone finding access to the dark web and discovering various illegal marketplaces. Nothing particularly creative or scary, just the usual stuff you'd expect. But then, about halfway through the story, something strange happened. The writing style changed subtly. It became more detailed, more authentic somehow. The protagonist in the story found a link to something called a Red Room, which I vaguely knew was supposed to be this urban legend about live-streamed violence on the dark web. Most people say they don't actually exist, that they're just internet myths. What caught my attention was that in the middle of a paragraph, There was what looked like an actual URL. Not a normal web address, but one of those long strings of random letters and numbers followed by .onion that you need the Tor browser to access. It was oddly specific for an AI to generate, and it stood out from the rest of the text. I remember thinking it was weird that the AI would include an actual formatted .onion address rather than just writing a dark web URL or something generic. It seemed too specific, too technical. I figured maybe the AI had been trained on actual dark web discussions and was reproducing patterns it had learned. Out of sheer curiosity, and this is where I made my massive mistake, I decided to check if this was a real format for a dark web address. I wasn't planning to visit it, just to verify if the AI had produced something technically accurate. I already had Tor installed on my laptop from years ago when there was all that buzz about online privacy, though I'd barely used it. I fired up Tor, copied the URL from the generated story, and pasted it into a search to see if this format would be recognized as valid or if it would just return an error. I expected it to say address not found or something similar. Instead, it started loading. My heart rate immediately spiked. I hadn't actually expected it to be a real address. I moved my cursor to close the window, but before I could click, the page finished loading. What I saw still gives me nightmares. It was a minimalist black page with a video player in the center and a chat sidebar. The video was buffering, but the thumbnail showed what looked like a dimly lit room. There was a counter showing 16 current viewers. The chat was active with messages scrolling by too quickly to read properly, but the tone seemed excited, anticipatory. I should have closed it immediately. Any sane person would have. But there's this horrible moment of paralysis that comes when you're confronted with something so unexpected. Your brain needs a second to confirm what you're seeing is real. The video started playing. The room was concrete, industrial looking, with a single overhead light. There was a chair in the center with someone sitting in it, their head covered. A figure in a mask entered the frame, carrying something that caught the light, metal, sharp. That's when I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked over my mug of cold tea. I unplugged my laptop, took out the battery, and sat in the dark of my living room, trying to process what had just happened. Had I just stumbled onto an actual red room? Was that really happening in real time? Or was it some kind of sick prank, a shock site designed to scare people? After about an hour of panic, I convinced myself it must have been fake. A disturbing prank site made to look like the real thing to frighten curious browsers. I plugged my laptop back in and immediately ran a full virus scan, changed all my passwords, and deleted Tor completely. I went back to the NeuralScribe website to report what had happened, thinking they should know their AI was somehow generating links to disturbing content. But the site was gone. Just a generic 404 error. I tried searching for it again, but there was no trace of it ever existing. No search results, no Reddit threads mentioning it, nothing. That's when the real fear set in. Had I imagined the whole thing? No, I couldn't have. The article I'd been working on still had some of the AI-generated paragraphs incorporated into it. Over the next few days, I dug deeper, trying to find any information about NeuralScribe. Eventually, on a cybersecurity forum, I found a single thread discussing it. According to one user, NeuralScribe wasn't a legitimate AI tool at all, but a sophisticated phishing operation. Its real purpose wasn't to generate content, but to harvest data from users and, in some cases, to trick people into accessing dark web sites they'd never normally visit. The theory was that by getting innocent users to visit these sites, they created plausible deniability for the actual operators. If authorities ever traced access to these sites, they'd find normal people with no history of criminal activity, making it harder to identify the real criminals behind them. What keeps me up at night isn't just what I saw. but the fact that I accessed it from my home IP address. My name, my identity, is now potentially linked to that site in some database somewhere. Every unexpected knock at the door makes me jump. Every time my internet buffers, I wonder if someone is monitoring my connection. I've since moved flats, switched internet providers, and bought a new laptop. I've become almost paranoid about online security. No more working at 2 a.m. No more curious clicks. No more trusting unknown websites. The most terrifying part is that I'll never know for sure what I actually saw that night. Was it real? Were those real people? Is my name now on some watch list? Or was the whole thing an elaborate scam designed to make me feel exactly this way? Paranoid, afraid, and isolated. I keep thinking about how that URL was embedded in an otherwise unremarkable piece of AI-generated text. How many other people received similar links? How many of them clicked out of the same curiosity that I did? Are they out there too, lying awake at night, wondering if they're being watched? The dark web isn't just some mysterious hidden corner of the internet anymore. It found its way to me through something as benign as an AI writing tool. The line between our everyday online experience and the darkest parts of the internet is thinner than we think. Sometimes it's just one curious click away. I used to think some people just changed, that it was a normal part of growing up. People drift, get bitter, harden. That was how I explained what happened to her for a long time. I told myself she just became someone else, that it wasn't personal. It took me years to admit it wasn't normal at all. Her name was Ava. We were best friends growing up, same street, same school, same everything. There wasn't a single sleepover or birthday party where she wasn't there. For years, we were like our own little orbit. She was smart and weird in a good way. The kind of kid who made up stories during lunch and drew creepy comics in the margins of her notebooks. I liked that about her. She made boring things feel alive. Then she disappeared. It was the summer after graduation. No big send-off, no party. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Her aunt posted some photo on Facebook of Ava in Italy or Greece, some old town with narrow stone streets. I hadn't even known she was leaving. I messaged her more than once. No replies. Eventually, I stopped. Not because I was mad, but because I didn't want to feel like I was bothering her. I figured maybe she needed space or just wanted a fresh start. She came back 2 years later. It wasn't announced. There was no big reunion. I just ran into her at a petrol station of all places. I remember how weirdly bright it was inside, the way bad fluorescent lighting always is. I saw her before she saw me. And even though her face hadn't changed much, I felt something tighten in my chest. Her eyes weren't the same. It wasn't anything like you see in some movies, where they can literally see darkness or whatever. But the way she looked at me, it was like I was an inconvenience, like she'd already moved on and was annoyed I hadn't. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, just gave me a flat hey and grabbed her receipt. I stood there like an idiot holding a Fanta. I didn't even say much, just something like, "You're back." And she nodded and walked out. That was it. I tried to reach out again, occasionally texting her. I got nothing back. I ran into her once more at a grocery store. Same deal, cold, flat, not mean, just completely uninterested. After a while, I gave up, and I told myself maybe that was fine. Maybe people don't always owe you an explanation for who they become. But part of me kept replaying that first moment in the gas station, the way she looked through me. That brings me to last year, It was a Saturday night, early fall. I was home alone, half watching a YouTube documentary with the volume low. My phone was face down. I remember the exact buzz it made, that long one, the kind you get with messages from people not in your contacts. I don't know why I even checked it. It was from Ava, or at least from her number. There wasn't a message, just a link, no context, no greeting. Just a string of random characters and a .onion address buried in the middle. I stared at it for probably a full minute. I didn't even breathe. My first thought was that it was a scam or malware. But some part of me, the old part that still remembered how close we were, told me she sent it on purpose, that there was a reason. I used an old laptop, booted it into Tails. I'd played with Tor before years ago, but never for anything like this. My hands were clammy the whole time. I told myself if anything looked shady, I'd kill the power immediately. The page took almost a full minute to load. When it finally did, it was just a black screen with a timer. 0248, just under 3 minutes. It counted down in red, and underneath it was a chat box already going. Lines of text, constant, some of it in languages I couldn't read. The rest was English, but coded, like slang or shorthand. I couldn't tell what they were talking about at first. When the timer hit 0, the stream flickered on. There was a chair in the middle of a concrete room. It was bolted to the floor, but empty. The room was completely empty, as far as I could see, with no windows. Just the hum of overhead lights and the faint echo of someone walking, somewhere off camera. I still didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the chat changed. People were typing numbers, making bids. Usernames I didn't recognize were posting names. Some were fake, some felt too real. One of them was next pick, pulled from chat. That's when I felt my stomach turn. I scrolled up to try and make sense of it, and that's when I saw her, Avenue, or what had to be her. Not her real name, but an old handle she used in middle school. I hadn't seen it in years. No one else could have remembered that. She was active, posting, typing like she belonged there. Then I saw it. Bid. £9,400. Then my name. M. Full name. Spelled correctly, properly capitalized, just sitting there like any other text. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. Couldn't even close the tab. I just sat there watching more usernames chime in. Seconded. Confirmed. Show us the face. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged it. Yanked the battery like that would somehow protect me. My ears were ringing. It was like that high-pitched tone you get when your body goes into survival mode. I don't remember standing up. I just remember pacing, hands shaking, heart doing this sick little flutter in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't know. 1 voicemail. It was 10 seconds of silence, then the sound of something scraping across concrete. That same sound from the stream. I threw the phone out, got a new number. Emails came next, one-liners. Things like, "We'll find you," or "Don't bother running." They were always from different addresses. Always with some little detail to let me know it was personal. I deleted everything and removed all of my private info off social media. I did my best to erase any trace of myself online. But the more I scrubbed, the more I realized how much of me was still floating out there. Then came the people. At first, I convinced myself it was just paranoia. I would walk to the store and feel the weight of someone behind me. I would glance out the window and see a car idling across the street, longer than made sense for someone doing nothing. but the patterns kept repeating. It was the same car, the same face. Not every day, but often enough to notice. Different angles, different times, always nearby, always lingering just long enough to register, but never long enough to confront. Eventually, I filed a police report. It was a waste of time. There were no direct threats, no evidence. They told me to block the emails and vary my daily routines. I had already done that. So I left. I moved to a different city. I changed my name. I found a place to rent off the books and stayed disconnected. I deleted every trace of myself online, and I stopped using any account tied to my real identity. For a while, I believed I was safe. That changed last week. Someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me walking home taken from behind. The framing was deliberate. The image was clear. It was taken recently, close and carefully. There was no note, no sender, no explanation, only the photograph. Now I am packing again. Because wherever Ava is, whatever she has become, she saw me. And this time, she chose me. I wasn't looking for anything specific that night. I couldn't sleep, and I'd already burned through the usual distractions, Netflix, Reddit, old messages I shouldn't have reread. That kind of night. You're not tired, just restless. Everything's quiet, but your head won't shut up. I ended up back on the dark web. I'd messed around with it before, mostly out of curiosity. Never bought anything, never went deep. But that night, I felt pulled toward it, like I was itching for something I couldn't name. They always say you should stop scrolling when your hands start to shake, or when you feel the temperature change in the room, or when the silence becomes too loud. It's one of those internet urban legends people share to scare each other off the deep end of the web. I used to think that was all drama. Just horror fanfare for people who wanted to feel edgy. Now I think those warnings exist for a reason. It started with insomnia, that kind of mindless, late-night restlessness where nothing feels real and the smallest click can lead to hours vanishing. I was going through a rough patch, jobless, between apartments, staying in my older brother's spare room and trying to keep out of the way. My days had no structure, and my nights were filled with screen glow and silence. I had gone through every surface web rabbit hole I could find, creepy forums, niche subreddits, amateur surveillance camera archives. At some point, I started getting bored with the usual stuff. It didn't hit the same. I wasn't looking for horror exactly. I just wanted to feel something. Anything. That's when I remembered the dark web. I'd heard all the stories, fake red rooms, black market hoaxes, the usual dramatic stuff. But I also knew the tech. I knew how to navigate it safely. Or at least, I thought I did. I spun up Tails OS on an old laptop, routed through Tor, and kept my identity clean. For a while, it was just curiosity. Old message boards, empty markets, strange listings with broken links. It was like walking through an abandoned shopping mall, but with the lingering smell of something rotting just out of sight. But one thread kept coming back. It was buried inside a defunct forum with barely any traffic, mostly dead links and gibberish posts. But one thread, titled simply "Windowless," had recent activity. A few users kept responding to each other in single words, like coded check-ins. I didn't understand what they were saying, but something about how quiet the rest of the forum was made that thread feel alive, like it was pulsing just under the surface. I watched it for days before someone posted something new. They dropped a link, No fanfare. Just a bare hyperlink with a timestamp and the words "real feed." It led to a login screen. I didn't have credentials, obviously, but I took a screenshot out of habit. A few minutes later, a second post appeared with a new link. This one had a different domain. I clicked it without really thinking. It brought me to a countdown. 1 minute 44 seconds. There was no text, no branding, just the timer and a black video window below it. I stared at it, trying to guess what it might be. The chat was open, but it was locked. I couldn't post, only watch. The numbers ticked down. I almost closed the tab, but something made me wait. Maybe it was the way the screen made everything around me feel darker. Or maybe I was just curious in a way I didn't want to admit. The hum of the air conditioning sounded distant, like I was sinking below something. When the timer hit 0, the feed activated. The screen lit up with a dim, grainy video of a room. Small, concrete, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, a chain on the back wall. Nothing else. At first it was empty. I thought maybe it was a hoax, another ARG, something theatrical. But then a figure stepped into frame. Not the person I expected. It was a man in dark clothes, face obscured. He looked into the camera briefly, then left the frame. A few seconds later, he returned dragging someone. The person's face was hidden, but they were conscious, struggling weakly, hands tied. They were shoved into the chair and strapped in. The chat exploded. Lines of text flew by. Most of it was incomprehensible. Users bidding, commenting, laughing. Some posted emojis. Others just spammed numbers. There was a list forming on the right. Usernames next to dollar amounts. And at the top of the list was a name I recognized. Mine. It didn't make sense. I hadn't logged in. I hadn't made an account. But there it was. My username from an old game account I hadn't used in years, spelled exactly the same. And next to it, a bid, £8,300. I felt something drop in my chest. My hands were sweating. I reached for the mouse, but it lagged. The screen flickered. The video kept going. The person in the chair looked up. Even with the resolution as bad as it was, I could see the fear in their face. They were crying, muffled. Their eyes scanned the room like they were looking for a way out, and for some awful reason, I felt like they could see me. Like I wasn't just watching, like I was part of it. The camera zoomed in slightly. More bids came in. More usernames I didn't recognize, but mine stayed near the top. Then the figure came back, holding something. A blunt object. The way he moved was calm, mechanical. And just before the feed cut out, he looked directly at the camera. The screen went black. The chat froze. Then the browser closed itself. I sat there staring at my desktop, heart racing. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't clicked anything except the link. How did it know my name? That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, or what little I could see of it, staring through the screen. Not like he was performing, like he was watching me. The next day, I got an email. No subject line. Just an image. A photo of my house, taken from the street. It wasn't recent. It had to be at least a year old, before I moved. But it was mine. You could see my old car in the driveway. The busted mailbox I never fixed. More messages came after that, each one from a different address. Most just contained links. I didn't click them. One had a video attachment. I deleted it without opening it. Even hovering over it made my skin crawl. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 10 seconds of silence, followed by the sound of something metal scraping across concrete. I left the house that night. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove. Slept in a motel an hour away. Threw the laptop in a dumpster behind a gas station. Bought a new phone the next morning. But it didn't matter, because the next morning there was a piece of paper tucked under the motel door. Just one sentence. Your bid was accepted. I don't know how they found me. Maybe they never lost me. I moved across the country after that. Changed my name. Got a job under the table. No credit cards. No internet in my name. I even stopped using public Wi-Fi. I did everything you're supposed to do when you want to disappear. And for a while, I thought I'd done it. It worked. For almost a year. Until last week. I found a box outside my door. No postage, no return address. Just sitting there like someone had placed it and walked away. Inside was a single item. A webcam. Old, dusty, with a cracked lens. The kind you'd plug into a desktop tower back in 2005. I hadn't seen one like it in years. Underneath it, there was a folded note. Smile for the feed. I haven't turned on a screen since, and I don't think I ever will again. I thought I was doing something good. That's what makes this whole situation so much worse. 6 months ago, I was just someone trying to make the internet a safer place. Now, I'm hiding in a Premier Inn somewhere in the Midlands, knowing that tomorrow night, thousands of people will tune in to watch me become the star of my own nightmare. It started when I applied for a job as a content moderator with a company called SafeNet Solutions. They advertise themselves as specialists in keeping harmful content off social media platforms. The work seemed meaningful, protecting children from inappropriate material, removing violent content, flagging harassment. The kind of job where you could feel like you were making a difference. I'd been unemployed for nearly 8 months after my last position was made redundant. Living in a shared house in Birmingham with people half my age. Watching my savings dwindle while sending off countless applications. When SafeNet offered me the position working from home with decent pay, I jumped at it without asking too many questions. The training was straightforward. They gave me access to their proprietary software that would queue up flagged content for review. Videos, images, live streams, all reported by automated systems or other users as potentially violating community guidelines. My job was to watch each piece of content and make a decision. Remove it, leave it up, or escalate it to a senior moderator. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Spam, harassment, people posting copyrighted material, the occasional violent video or inappropriate image involving children, which would get immediately escalated and removed. The work was emotionally draining. You see humanity at its worst when you're cleaning up after it. But it felt necessary. I worked remotely, reviewing content for 8 hours a day from my bedroom. The company provided the computer and software, along with strict guidelines about confidentiality. We weren't allowed to discuss our work with anyone outside the company, ostensibly to protect user privacy and prevent people from gaming the moderation system. About 2 months into the job, I started noticing patterns in some of the content that came through my queue. Videos that looked like they were filmed in similar locations, industrial settings with concrete walls and minimal furnishing. The content itself wasn't explicitly violating guidelines, but something about it felt off. Empty rooms with strange equipment, brief clips of preparations for something unclear. When I flagged these for escalation, asking for guidance on whether they violated guidelines. My supervisor would respond that they'd been reviewed and deemed acceptable. I was told to stop wasting time on borderline cases and focus on clear violations. The message was clear: approve these and move on. I tried to push back, suggesting that these videos might be connected to something harmful, but I was reminded that I was new and still in my probationary period. SafeNet had strict policies about overreach. Moderators who flagged too much borderline content would be let go for inefficiency. I needed the job, so I started approving the strange videos without comment. Then I began noticing something else. Some of the videos had embedded metadata that my software could read, but that wouldn't be visible to normal users. Location data, timestamps, user identifiers. I shouldn't have been able to see this information. It suggested my moderation software had deeper access to these platforms than a normal content reviewer would need. One evening, while reviewing a particularly odd video of an empty room with metal restraints visible in the background, I noticed that the metadata showed it was being live-streamed to thousands of viewers simultaneously. This wasn't a recorded video that someone had uploaded. It was happening live. And yet, it was coming through my queue as if it was standard user-generated content awaiting moderation. That's when I realized I wasn't moderating content that had already been posted. I was pre-approving content that was about to be streamed live. My approval was what allowed these broadcasts to go public. I started paying closer attention to the content coming through my queue. Mixed in with normal reported posts were these live feeds from empty rooms, industrial settings, medical equipment, restraints, each one tagged with metadata showing thousands of waiting viewers, and each one requiring my approval before it could broadcast. I was essentially the gatekeeper for what I was beginning to suspect were preparation streams for red rooms. I tried to refuse approval for one of these feeds, marking it as violating guidelines for depicting implements that could be used for harm. Within an hour, I received a call from my supervisor. They reminded me that I was still in my probationary period and that my approval rates had been flagged as concerning. Too many rejections could result in immediate termination. But they also said something that chilled me. They mentioned that they had my address, my banking details, my emergency contacts, standard information for any employer, of course. But the way they referenced it felt like a veiled threat, like they wanted me to know how easy it would be to find me if I became a problem. I kept approving the feeds. What choice did I have? I needed the work, and I convinced myself that maybe I was wrong about what I was seeing. Maybe these were just art projects or horror film sets. Maybe the viewer counts were inflated. Maybe I was letting the stress of the job make me paranoid. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. A new type of content started coming through my queue. Not just empty rooms anymore, but rooms with people in them. People who looked unconscious or restrained. People who weren't acting. People who looked genuinely terrified when they were conscious. The metadata on these streams showed viewer counts in the tens of thousands. Chat functions that were active with comments I couldn't read, but that seemed to be taking requests or making suggestions. Payment information showing cryptocurrency transactions happening in real time. I couldn't approve them. I just couldn't. I started marking them all as violations, knowing it would flag my performance, but unable to live with myself if I didn't. For 3 days, I rejected every single one of these streams that came through my queue. On the 4th day, I received another package at my house. I hadn't ordered anything, and there was no delivery note. Inside was a tablet computer that automatically connected to a network when I turned it on. The screen showed a live feed of my own bedroom, taken from the camera on the work computer SafeNet had provided. I was looking at myself looking at the tablet. A message appeared on the tablet screen. You've been very thorough in your moderating work. Time for a performance review. Below it was a link to another stream, one showing an empty room with a metal table in the center. In the corner of the screen was a viewer counter, already showing thousands of people waiting, and a countdown timer set for 2 weeks from that day. I packed immediately and left Birmingham that night. I've been moving around England since then, staying in different hotels, buying train tickets with cash, avoiding CCTV when possible. But they keep finding me. Notes left in hotel rooms, messages sent to new phone numbers I've bought, photos of me taken in public places that get sent to whatever device I'm using. The most disturbing realization is that SafeNet Solutions isn't what I thought it was. It's not a company fighting against harmful content. It's a company facilitating it. They use legitimate content moderation as cover for something much darker. The majority of moderators probably are genuine, reviewing normal social media posts. But some of us, selected for particular reasons, were unknowingly gatekeeping for red room broadcasts. I think about how many streams I approved over those 4 months. How many people were harmed because I clicked approve on their preparatory footage. How many victims suffered because I was too concerned about keeping my job to ask harder questions about what I was really moderating. Last week, I tried going to the police in 3 different cities. The evidence I have is circumstantial. Screenshots, metadata, the tablet they sent me. But when I tried to describe the situation, it sounds like the paranoid delusions of someone who spent too much time looking at disturbing content. They take reports, but I can tell they think I'm either lying or having a mental health crisis. The countdown on the tablet now shows less than 2 days remaining. The viewer count has grown to tens of thousands. I've started receiving more specific messages about when and where I need to be. An address in Liverpool, a time, consequences for my family if I don't comply. And they've proven they know exactly where my sister lives, where my elderly parents shop, which route my niece takes to school. I've come to understand that the entire system is designed to implicate people who work for them. Every piece of content I approved created a digital trail connecting me to these broadcasts. Every rejection I made after discovering the truth could be used as evidence that I knew what was happening, but participated anyway. I'm not just a target now. I'm a liability who knows too much about their operation. The most terrifying part is realizing how vast this network must be. How many other content moderation companies might be fronts for similar operations. How many people think they're doing honest work cleaning up the internet when they're actually facilitating its darkest corners? I keep wondering if any of my colleagues at SafeNet knew what we were really doing. Were some of them complicit from the beginning? Were others like me, gradually drawn into something they didn't understand until it was too late? Or am I the only one who stumbled across this particular stream of content? The tablet just chimed with a new notification. The message is simple. Final preparations complete. Transport details being sent to your current location. I'm in a service station cafe somewhere between Leicester and Nottingham, trying to disappear into the crowd, but somehow they still know exactly where I am. I'm going to post this and then ditch the tablet somewhere. Maybe throw it in a bin, maybe leave it on the train. I don't know if it will make any difference. I don't know if anyone will believe this account, or if they'll dismiss it as the ramblings of someone who's lost touch with reality. But if you're working in content moderation, especially for smaller companies or remote positions, pay attention to what you're really approving. Ask questions about the metadata you can access. Notice patterns in the content. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct even if it cost you the job. I thought I was making the internet safer. Instead, I was helping to make it infinitely more dangerous for the most vulnerable people. Every approval was another step toward this moment, when I become the content instead of the moderator. The countdown shows approximately 30 hours remaining. Thousands of people are waiting to watch what happens next. And somewhere in Liverpool, a room is being prepared for tomorrow night's broadcast. I should have asked more questions from the beginning. Should have trusted my instincts about those first strange videos. Should have realized that a job that seemed too good to be true probably was. But it's too late for should-haves now. The only thing left is to run and hope that somehow I can break free from a system I helped maintain, without ever understanding what it really was. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent months deciding what content was safe for public consumption. Now thousands of people are waiting to consume content featuring me. The moderator has become the moderated. The most dangerous button I've ever clicked wasn't labeled something like launch missile or even delete account. It was innocuously titled recommended darknet experience. It turns out when a VPN service offers to show you what you're protecting yourself from, sometimes they're actually showing you who's coming for you next. 3 months have passed since I clicked that button, and I haven't slept through the night since. I work as a data analyst for a healthcare company in Birmingham. Nothing particularly exciting, just crunching numbers and generating reports about hospital efficiency and patient outcomes. I'm not technically a cybersecurity expert, but I know enough about computers to be the person my parents and friends call when their Wi-Fi stops working. My interest in online privacy started about a year ago after our company experienced a data breach. Nothing catastrophic, just some leaked email addresses and phone numbers. But it was enough to make me realize how vulnerable our digital lives really are. So I started researching ways to better protect myself online. I installed ad blockers, switched to more secure browsers, stopped using Google for searches, that sort of thing. I became increasingly uncomfortable with how much information I was giving away just through normal browsing. I'd read articles about VPNs, virtual private networks, and how they could help maintain anonymity online, so I decided to try one out. After comparing different services, I settled on one called Secure Shield VPN. It had good reviews, a reasonable price point, and offered a 30-day free trial with all premium features included. I downloaded the app, created an account with a new email address I'd set up specifically for privacy tools, and started exploring the features. The app was sleek and user-friendly, with the usual array of server locations to choose from and different protocols for connection. What caught my attention, though, was a section called Premium Experiences that was only available to trial users and paying subscribers. The description explained these were curated online experiences that showcased the importance of privacy and security tools. One in particular stood out. Recommended darknet experience. See what you're protecting yourself from. I was intrigued. I'd heard of the dark web, of course, but had never actually accessed it. I knew it required special browsers like Tor and wasn't something you could just Google your way into. The idea that this VPN would offer some kind of guided tour seemed educational, if a bit gimmicky. I figured it was probably just some pre-selected sites that showed off illegal marketplaces from a safe distance. The digital equivalent of a safari. It was a Friday evening when I decided to check it out. My girlfriend was away visiting her parents for the weekend, so I had the flat to myself. I remember it was raining heavily, drops drumming against the windows as I sat at my desk with a glass of whiskey beside my laptop. I clicked on the recommended darknet experience option in the app. which prompted a notification. This will configure your system for secure Tor access and guide you through selected darknet locations. Continue. I clicked yes, expecting some kind of tutorial to appear. Instead, the app seemed to make some changes to my system settings, and then a custom browser window opened automatically. It looked similar to Tor, but had the Secure Shield logo in the corner. A welcome message explained that I was now browsing through a secure, anonymous connection and could explore the curated site safely. The interface showed a sidebar with different categories: marketplaces, forums, services, information, and one simply labeled Other. Each had several sub-entries with innocuous names like Alpha Market or Liberty Forum. It felt surprisingly legitimate, like browsing an app store rather than the infamous dark web. I started with the marketplaces section, curious about what was actually for sale in these notorious black markets. The first site looked like a bare-bones version of Amazon or eBay, with listings for drugs, counterfeit goods, and hacked account credentials. Nothing I hadn't expected to see. The next few sites were similar, though some specialized in specific categories like prescription medications or fake IDs. After about an hour of casual browsing, I switched to the forums section. These were more interesting. Discussions about privacy, politics, technology, and yes, illegal activities. I was careful not to create any accounts or interact, just observing from a distance. Then I noticed something odd. In the other category, there was a listing called Premium Access, with a small crown icon beside it. The description simply read, "Exclusive content for valued members." I assumed this was just some additional marketing for the VPN service, perhaps showcasing the kind of content you might accidentally stumble upon without proper protection. When I clicked on it, a loading screen appeared with text explaining that this area was being specially configured for my session. This struck me as strange. Why would one particular section need special configuration? But before I could reconsider, the page loaded. It opened to what looked like a streaming site, similar to YouTube but with a minimalist black interface. There were about a dozen video thumbnails arranged in a grid. Each had a vague title like Session 23 or Interview 7 and what appeared to be a date from the previous month. No descriptions, no view counts, no comments. I clicked on one titled Orientation 4, assuming it might be some kind of instructional video about the dark web or privacy tools. The video buffered for a moment, then began to play. It showed a room that looked like a basement or storage area. Concrete walls, no windows, harsh fluorescent lighting. In the center was a person sitting in a chair, facing the camera. They were wearing ordinary clothes, but had a black hood covering their head. Behind them stood another figure in dark clothing, face obscured by shadows. My first thought was that this was some kind of mock interrogation scenario, perhaps a dramatization meant to illustrate the dangers of compromised privacy. But as the video continued, I realized with growing horror that this wasn't staged. The hooded person's hands were bound behind them, and they were visibly trembling. The standing figure began asking questions in a distorted voice. Questions about usernames, passwords, and access codes. I quickly closed the video, my heart pounding in my chest. This couldn't be real, could it? It had to be some kind of extreme roleplay or scare tactic designed to emphasize the importance of security. Yet something about the victim's posture, the genuine fear evident even through the hood, felt sickeningly authentic. Against my better judgment, I clicked on another video, this one titled Session 17. Similar setup, different victim. This time, the interrogation was more aggressive. I shut it down after less than a minute, feeling physically ill. I was about to close the entire browser when a chat notification appeared in the corner of the screen. Enjoying the premium access content. Your feedback is valuable to us. I froze, staring at the message. I hadn't logged into any chat system. I hadn't provided any way for them to contact me within this browser. Yet here was a direct message, clearly indicating that someone was aware of my presence, my actions, my viewing choices. I didn't respond, hoping they would assume I was away from my computer. Another message appeared. We notice you've accessed 2 of our exclusive videos. Your interest has been noted. Panic rising, I closed the browser completely and shut down my laptop. I unplugged my router for good measure, as if physically disconnecting from the internet could somehow erase what had just happened. I spent the rest of the evening in a state of growing paranoia, checking my locks, closing my curtains, jumping at every noise from the street below. By morning, I had almost convinced myself that I'd overreacted. The videos were probably just elaborate fakes, designed to shock users into taking privacy seriously. The messages were likely automated, triggered by my viewing activity. Nothing to worry about. I cautiously turned my laptop back on, but didn't reconnect to the internet immediately. Instead, I checked for any unusual files or programs that might have been installed. Everything seemed normal. When I finally reconnected and checked my email, there was nothing suspicious there either. I uninstalled the Secure Shield VPN app and decided to put the whole experience behind me. 3 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply my home address, nothing else. The body of the email contained a link. Despite every instinct screaming not to click it, my curiosity and fear got the better of me. I opened it in an incognito browser window. It was a Google Street View image of my flat building. But this wasn't from the public Street View database. This was a recent photo taken from across the street, showing my specific window. My curtains were open, and if I looked closely, I could just make out my silhouette sitting at my desk. Below the image was text that made my blood run cold. Premium members receive home visits. Your trial begins tomorrow. I left my flat that night, staying with a friend under the pretense that I had a plumbing issue. I reported the email to the police as a potential threat, but without more concrete evidence, they couldn't do much besides take a statement. I didn't tell them about the dark web videos. How could I explain that without implicating myself in potentially viewing something illegal? Over the next week, I received 3 more emails from different addresses. Each contained photos taken at increasingly close range. One from the street directly in front of my building, one from the entrance hallway, and finally, one that could only have been taken from inside my flat while I was away, showing my desk with my laptop closed on it. The final email had no text, just an attachment, a video file. It showed hooded figures entering an apartment that looked similar to mine, finding the occupant asleep, and I couldn't watch more than a few seconds. The file name was preview session24.mp4. I never returned to my flat. I quit my job, moved to a different city, changed my phone number, and created all new email addresses. I withdrew most of my savings in cash and found a place to rent that didn't require background checks or digital payments. I bought a new laptop and made sure it's never connected to any accounts that could be traced to my previous identity. It's been 3 months now. Sometimes I go days without thinking about it, almost convincing myself that I overreacted to an elaborate scare tactic. Then I'll notice someone looking at me too long on the street, or I'll receive an email to an account that no one should know about, containing nothing but a crown emoji. Last week, I woke up to find my new laptop open when I know I closed it before going to bed. The browser was open to a blank page with just a countdown timer showing 7 days. I don't know who these people are. I don't know if they're government operatives running some kind of twisted surveillance program, criminals documenting their activities, or something else entirely. I don't know why they chose me or what happens when the countdown reaches 0. All I know is that the tools we use to protect ourselves online can sometimes connect us to things we were never meant to see. And once you've been granted premium access, there's no way to cancel your subscription.